Every now and then, Mercury, the messenger of the gods, the guy who's in charge of marketing, mercantile, and news, information, and more, will do something called an elemental air year. And this is his Earth year coming up in 2023, where he stays in Earth signs for 6 months out of 12, which will help you with your grounding, prosperity, body health, resources, and material success in life. We're going to talk to you today about how that works for your sign with one of astrologers. There he is coming in, Gary Caton, an expert on the Mercury cycles, and we'll be talking about his perspective on this as well, so that you can get the most out of what is going to be an elemental Earth year with Mercury in 2023. So he's in the door, so I'm going to invite him in right now. All right. Hey, Gary, welcome to my channel. I'm so grateful you're here to be our Mercury expert today. Just remind people about your book, your website, and a little bit why you're the Mercury guy, besides that incredible, cool beard that looks like the wise man.
Thank you, Lori. It's wonderful to be here. It's always great to see you. So yeah, the book is Hermetica Triptycha, the Mercury Elemental Year. I wrote this back in, well, it was published in 2017, but it took me probably 7 years off and on to write this book, because there is so much more to Mercury retrograde than the pop, press was trying to make it out to be, this like simple-minded thing. And it got to be where, like, people who weren't even astrologers were like just regurgitating this drivel every time. And I was just like, oh, stop, it hurts. And so I decided to write a book on it. And so you can find the book at Rebido Press is the publisher. You can see there's links to that. There's links to the Amazon page on my website. My website is dreamastrologer.com, like what you do at night, dream astrologer, because that's how I became an astrologer. I had a dream where I saw Venus with the sun. And then eventually I kind of switched gears from studying the Venus cycle. I was sort of forced to. I was up in New York City. Michael Luton invited me up there to speak to his group up there. And he said, well, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about Venus. He says, well, nope, you can't do that. I got a group of women coming in here talking about that. You got to do something else. So I was like, so I was like, okay, I'll do Mercury, because I knew Mercury's cycle was similar to Venus. The scale's different, but the basic layout is kind of the same. And from there, it just kind of organically. And then, I do a lot of astrophotography, because I believe doing astrology with your face is like the embodiment of it's just being a stargazer, man. It's like actually being out under the sky. This is the thing. This is the magical act that birthed civilization as we know it. In fact, Lori, the ancient Mesopotamian stargazers, they built ziggurats. They built artificial mountains so that they could get up high enough to see when the planets were rising and when they were setting. And this was right at the time when civilization as we know it was being birthed, and all the it's really interesting how the 5 visible planets represent the basic cornerstones of civilization. Like Venus is the arts, right? Jupiter is like religion and the priesthood. Saturn is agriculture. Who am I missing? Mars, organized warfare, right? And Mercury, writing and astronomy.
Well, it is also interesting to me, like just as a concept, because we're going to be drilling down into Mercury, how these planets are not just codes for your life, who you are, but also codes and clues about what stories are going to emerge from the sky. As above so below, and as below so above reflects each other. And I'm going to tell a story about you just because it's fun. When I first met Gary, we were talking about minor asteroids, because I'm an asteroid junkie, and now he is too, because they're like the punctuation marks and the clauses and the parentheses of our chart. And he has the asteroid stargazer on his ascendant. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what he's famous for when he's not doing astrology, besides his own joy of being under the stars, are these incredible pictures, like photographs of the sky and of the planets, and they like are works of art. So I mean, when you think of these kinds of things, you would say to little 5-year-old Gary, you're going to be a stargazer one day.
Yeah, well, I wanted to be an astronaut actually, but it was the closest thing, culturally to what I ended up being. I was like a starman, you know, like be an astronaut, right? So yeah, I started going out, and pretty soon it's you know, I was getting photos of Venus, and she's so bright and beautiful. She's easy to get as far as photographs, and the moon and Jupiter. And I realized like Mercury was the one that's hard to get. Like he's elusive, Quicksilver, right? And so it was like, I'm gonna like focus on this cat and like capture him, man. It became a thing for me. And in the process, I realized like, you know what, some months Mercury's not even on the menu in terms of the sky. Like you're not going to see him. So, and then other months, like, oh, he's nice and bright, high and bright. And so I began to, what's going on here, you know? And so there's this rhythm where Mercury is invisible and then visible. And so it just so happened that in one of the months where Mercury was not visible, I was going back through my photographs and like looking at them. And I had a copy of the Emerald Tablet like right on my desk. And I was, you know, the language about the above and the below. And by the way, it doesn't simply say as above, so below. It says
As below. No?
Sorry?
You go ahead and say it.
It says that which is above corresponds to that which is below, and that which is below corresponds to that which is above in order to accomplish the miracles of the one. Right. And so I was like, oh, above, below, like, could they be talking about this dance that I'm like, he's below the horizon, I can't see him one month, and then he's above the next month. I was like, that's probably like, no, it's philosophy, dude. It's like subtle. It's like you're being too literal. And then something in me said, no, look. And I did. And you know what? It absolutely works both ways. Yes, of course, it's subtle, philosophical, esoteric. There's a whole lot of stuff about alchemy in that document, but it actually works astronomically. There are alignments where Mercury is most visible. It's called the maximum elongation from the sun. As Mercury gains speed and moves out away from the sun, he reaches a place where he's the largest distance between the sun. That's when you're going to see him, because he's out from under the beams of the sun, right? So you have this maximum elongation, and then he goes invisible and he conjuncts with the sun, so it's below the horizon. Then he has this other maximum elongation in the morning sky, and guess what? All three of those events, it's a triptych, right? It's a gathering of three things that seem to be different, but they're actually the same because they all happen in the same zodiacal degrees. And I was like, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, like, that's probably just like this time, right? I was like, that probably doesn't happen every time. It's like a fluke, right? I go, no, it's every single time. It's like this magical sacred geometry thing about the orbit of Mercury, where you have this above, below, above, this triptych of alignments and my mind was blown, man. I called my my alchemy tutor, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, that's he's like, slow down, man. And I finally explained it to him, and I was like, and then in the process of explaining to him, I realized not only that, but then later in the Emerald Tablet, it says it has a sequence that is has to do with the elements. Its father is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, and the earth is its nurse. Well, this is fire, right? Sun, fire, moon, water, air, earth. Now, this is the reverse zodiacal order, which, by the way, when Mercury makes these triple alignments, he'll make triple alignments about 4 to 6 of the triple alignments will happen in a single element. Then it will move to the next element over a course of 6 to 7 years. And guess what order Mercury retrograde goes through the elements? Backwards, of course, in the exact order there in the Emerald Tablet. So at this point, I was like,
that's really amazing, because a lot of the ancient traditions, like the Hermetica and the Emerald Tablet and the documents, even from Sumer, they were looked at as like stories about, you know, deities. But a lot of astronomers have been able to take a look at that material and go, no, like this creation myth of ancient Sumer is the creation myth of our solar system, with another body smashing a planet, creating the asteroid belt. So they actually knew the scoop. They were just using like a story to like encode it, like you would learn in nursery school. You know, I learned you'll learn ways to code knowledge in story, probably to preserve it. Now, let me just say, so the elemental air year, which is what we're going to do today for all signs, and Mercury being the magical trickster, coyote, weirdo, super strange planet that you just described with this triptych. This is one of his years where he's going to lock and load mostly in the earth signs until the very end of the year with a little Sag, a Capricorn share, right? But mostly we're looking at the first three big retrograde periods of Mercury huddled in Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. And so tell us, as a general thought, what does that mean for the world? What does it mean, you know, as a collective, that he's spending so much time invested in earth signs? And that's
Right.
opposed to like air signs, which I think was his last iteration. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. So yeah, so the sequence is fire, water, air, earth, and we just came from a few years in air, and like you know, just an example that comes to mind is I wrote a blog when Mercury, you know, went into the air signs, when the retrogrades were going to be in the air signs, and you know what that means is that Mercury spends more time in that element than all the other elements combined. So it's a tremendous emphasis. And so, and Mercury rules everything from day-to-day communications to short distance travel to currency and market activity. There's a lot of things that Mercury is in charge of. And so this element becomes really important in our day-to-day lives. And so, for instance, when I wrote this blog about the air elemental year, I said, hey, look, check it out. Bitcoin was born in a year of air. And then 6 to 7 years later, Etherium comes along. And then 6 to 7 years later, we have this big NFT boom. And then Etherium gets an upgrade, right? So it's like every time Mercury does this dance where it's super concentrated in the air signs, you have this big development in the crypto world. And oh, and by the way, in the book, I talk about how, guess what? And I suppose this is just a coincidence. The first flight, the Wright brothers, right? And the landing on the moon, guess what year they happened in? Just take a wild guess.
Air years, elemental.
Air years, yeah. Oh, you know. So it definitely has mundane significations. Excuse me. I was born in an air year. And so, you know, all of my sort of, you know, connections with animal totems and stuff like that often been flying animals, right? Like when I first got started down the spiritual path, I was studying architecture at Virginia Tech, and I had this dream where these crows were talking to me in English, and I was like, okay, that's weird, and it's like I want to know what the hell is going on here.
Well, that is fascinating. I never even thought of it that way, that not only do you have a natal Mercury placement in your chart by sign and house, but you also have, in the context of the year you were born, Mercury may have been, you know, in air, water, earth, or fire as a primary elemental focus. And that's something I didn't even think of before.
Well, I don't think
I mean, I was born, are we born the same year? Well, we'll have to disclose that, but are we vintage? I mean, I'm born in 62. Was that an air year?
Yes, I think so.
That's something interesting to also teach people, is to look not just at the placement of Mercury within the sign and house in their whole sign houses, natal sky, but also to look at the elemental year that was overlording at the time of birth. Yeah, of course you would have a fascination, Gary, with birds.
Yes, 62 is air as well,
I
Lauren.
thought so, because the reason I asked the question was because me too. Like, I shamanically trained, my totem animals are always have been air creatures, birds, right? I've had as a young child a pretty strong attention to birds. I had stuffies that were, as an adult, I had a stuffy crow and a stuffy bald eagle.
Aww.
I know. So the point of it all is that that's something I'm now realizing is why I have that air animal fixation.
Yeah, and so the meat of the book is actually, and let me just back up for a second and talk about that. So wherever Mercury is in your chart, you know, whatever sign and house and whatever it is in your chart, yes, that's your Mercury. But your Mercury, it's just a quick snapshot. Your birth chart is a snapshot of the heavens. The heavens are never still. They're always in motion. So they're coming from this place and they're going to this place. And so that's what I wanted to capture, is kind of the bookends for your personal Mercury. This place where, oh, before you were born, it spent a whole lot of time here. And then right after you were born, it spent a whole lot of time here. And those bookends are going to tell you as much about what's going on as that snapshot of the moment, right? It's going to fill out the picture. And so what I learned very quickly is like, oh, well, guess what? Elements are made of trigons, trines, right? Naturally, one of the reasons why we call them triplicities is because there's 3 of each sign, right? There's 3 signs of each element. And so you get this nice harmony. And so the signs of the same element tend to get along because trines are flowing. They, it's like, oh yeah, like you and I, we tend to be kind of airheads, and and so like if I'm having an airhead moment, you'll just be like, oh yeah.
My mom used to call me an airhead sometimes, or people tease me I was an airhead. I mean, what do you mean I'm an airhead? I'm all straight A's at school, but I know an airhead.
Oh my God, same here, but I can be such a space cadet sometimes,
Yeah.
and it's like, so.
My mother
anyway,
used to say I would lose my head if it wasn't screwed on, because I was always
yes. Oh my God, that one. Yes, I got that one for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's something I want to dive into in the future with you. And I might really want to look at that whole concept of the elemental air year in play at a time of birth. Because if you think about it, without getting too geeky, because we're going to talk, guys, we're going to give to your sign, YouTube watchers, hang in there.
Yes.
And we're going to also talk about the meaning for the world of elemental air in 23, after being in an element of earth in 23 to being in an air thing. But one of the thoughts I just had geeking out already is, having the placement of your natal Mercury in an element that isn't the elemental air year of the year, but knowing that Trigon exists in your natal sky and looking to see whether Mercury is able to witness or give testimony to those houses. So for example, Mercury is in my Aries 3rd house, can witness my Aquarian 1st, can witness and give testament to my 5th house. My Aquarian 1st house, my brain, can see my Libra 9th from the 3rd. That's no problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, would you apply it that way? Would you go into it?
I didn't really go there. I just talked about the fact that these 3 houses, generally speaking, so you're an Aquarius rising born in an air year, right? Mm-hmm. So the 3 signs where Mercury spent the most time were Aquarius, Gemini, and Libra, houses 1, 5, and 9. Now, the angular house of any of those 3 combinations is where I get the name. So that I call that the identity trigon, which is, by the way, again, same, right? And which is very interesting, because when you think about it, like you as a podcaster, and I don't mean this in any kind of way, so please don't take it like, anything but like positive. But I was podcasting a long time before you were, and way back when there was like a handful of us when I started podcasting. Literally, there's like 5 of us, I think, and so I was in the process of creating a new identity. There were no astrology podcasters. There was like actually 2 of the 5 that existed were in the town where I lived, and so just by. And then, I got on their podcast, and then one of my students was like, oh, you should have your own. And so anyways, but this idea of like that it's about identity, that like creating a new identity that didn't exist before is actually part of your dharma.
Oh, interesting. How fascinating. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That would be a whole great podcast we can dive into another time, about how that can influence you personally regarding the identity trigon. That's really cool.
And I was doing asteroids, by the way back at the beginning. My podcast was the Goddess Astrology podcast. Then it later became the Hermetic, because remember, I started out with Venus and then went to Mercury.
Yeah.
So now we can do the same thing in terms of the transits, right? Because this year, as Mercury travels through, and Mercury's going to be in Capricorn until like February, right?
Yeah, like it's going to be December 6th to February 11th.
A long time. And so this emphasis, you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel the same emphasis in the Virgo and the Taurus and Virgo houses, right? Mm-hmm. So, we can look at that. So is it going to be that 159? Are you going to be like, are you an earth sign rising? If you're an earth sign rising, you're going to be challenged to find a new identity. Now, this may not be, now, that sounds Herculean, but it need not be. In other words, if you think of identity, like for instance, people say, oh, I had to wear a lot of hats today. Each one of those hats that you put on, let's say, as a podcaster or as a counselor or as a business person or as as a citizen of whatever street you live on, all of those different hats are different identities. So the challenge would be, so let's look at how this works. So the first house is like discovering, oh, there's this other hat. I could be a podcaster. Wow. Now, as soon as I say yes to that, holy crap, look at all this stuff I can do. These creative opportunities, fifth house, arise. When I put on that hat, I've now got a new creative palette available to me. And oh my God, when I start playing with this creatively, it takes me places I never imagined before. Ninth house. I mean, people, I'm sure you know this. I mean, people from all over the world listen to these things. And I mean, I never imagined somebody in Croatia would be listening to anything I had to say. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so there's a strong, that means for all those Capricorn rising, Virgo rising, and Taurus rising, they're going to have an incredibly important journey through this 2023 year.
Yeah, it's gonna, and hey, look, we've been like through a sort of ringer, for the past few years, and it's like, it's been difficult, and you might feel like you got robbed of some pieces of your identity. And you know what? The truth is, some of those things are not coming back. And so what better time to start working on, like, okay, well, what else can I do? Because that particular part of my palette doesn't seem to be coming back. So what else is out there, and just have fun with it and just be open to it. The thing about the retrograde process is it's going against the normal motion, right? The vast majority of planetary motion is direct. So, and by the way, it doesn't simply go backwards. It goes like up and around, like there's this big looping motion that happens. And so it's about getting off the beaten track. It's about getting away from the normal, same old, like just, put on your blinders and, shuffle down the street. It's about like paying attention, like, oh, wow, there's this little side street I've never gone down. What's down there? Being curious and allowing yourself to get out of your ruts and to sort of, to discover, oh, wow, there's this new part of me and it might come across at first, it might be like someone else, like, oh, there's this new person that I discovered, but something about who they are, their identity turns me on. I get turned on when around this. And so, oh, well, generally speaking, Psychology 101 is the reason why is because that's you too. You're turning yourself on by seeing yourself in the mirror, essentially.
Well, you know how I see Mercury retrograde periods, and to remind our listeners that the reason we're even talking about it is the reason we're in such locked and loaded elemental 2 months year of Earth is because of the retrograde within those signs.
Right.
But what I was going to say is that I often think of the Neo in the Matrix, and when the cat does that double walk back, and it's a glitch in the Matrix.
Yes.
When Mercury's
Pay attention, yo.
Yeah, pay attention. Like those synchronicities, is like he's going against the primary motion of the direct motion direction, and it's like, okay, so we're going to rip out of this matrix, folks. And so I notice that my retrograde cycles, when I'm really paying attention, are, yeah, sure, your laptop breaks down and travel plans can go askew, sure. But then what's the road less traveled that you take because of the glitch? And so synchronicities increase. Synchronicities increase, and you can participate in that. You can amplify it by being consciously aware of what's happening.
Yeah. If we just choose to complain and blame and say, oh, thanks a lot, Mercury, it's like, really? Is that like that all you want to get out of it? I mean, okay, like maybe, I've been there, right? Like not every single retrograde am I like being enlightened or anything, you know what I'm saying? But occasionally there have been times, I mean, dude, I traveled all around this country and yours and others, giving lectures for a decade, and I did a lot of it during retrogrades. And like you can't stop living. You can't stop being who you are. You find a way, you know what I'm saying? And in the process of finding a way, yeah, some pretty cool stuff happens, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And so
yeah,
this year in particular, those Virgo, Taurus, Cappy people are getting a lot of intensity around the whole magic and the whole mystery and the whole, weird, high strangeness, crazy stuff that can happen when Mercury retrogrades and really affects them
yeah.
this year.
And
Maybe we
and
should, yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
I think maybe we should talk about the 3 times this year that this is happening as well.
Well, particularly one thing I would say about for Capricorn, um, there's Capricorn's been through a lot, right? We had Saturn, Pluto, we had Mars, Venus. There's been a lot of alignments happening in Capricorn, and so it reminds me of like one of the other things that I do. I've remodeled like 5 or 6 houses at this point in my life, and so whenever there's a room that's in the process of being remodeled, there's stages to the work, right? And so like the Saturn Pluto stage would be like when you gut the freaking walls and like tear everything out, and it's just like the bones and right, and there's dust and it's a wreck, right?
Mhm.
And but then you put back the new stuff, and so I think like at this stage the Mercury coming in there is kind of like what I call the trim work after you've put back, and it's like all those finishing touches, like you put the trim around the thing, you put a little bead of caulk to like so all the edges are nice and smooth and even, and it's like that. So I mean, if Capricorn's probably, I can imagine they're saying, oh God, one more thing in my sign, like seriously.
No, they've been through the ringer. Yeah, they had that Pluto transits of 2008. Saturn was in there back in the day,
Yeah,
2019, 20, and they've been through it. They've been through it. And I
yeah,
think with Saturn, I have a Capricorn friend of mine, ex-husband, actually really close with him. And he's funny enough, he's like been through it. Like he's like ready for the trim work, please. Mercury.
yes,
I
right.
would like a
Let's put a
filial,
bow on
like,
this.
and can you put some pot lighting in while you're at it?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's like putting a bow on it, wrapping it up, moving on. Like, okay, this room's finished, and guess what? It's literally like that. Like if you think about your chart as a series of houses, right, or rooms in a house, is actually a better metaphor. I think it's rooms in the house that is your life.
Mhm.
And like, okay, this room is in the process of being remodeled. So what do you want to do? What accent would you like to add, Um, and so forth. And so yeah, like in that case, like I think it's probably like the end of a very major remodel project. Whereas, like in Taurus, well, you've had Uranus there for a while, right? So there's a fairly major remodel project going on there that is still going to go on for some time. So
Yes,
you're
until
kind of in the middle,
2026, yeah.
so this might be more like the middle stage where it's like, okay, I'm past getting everything ripped out and I've added a few new things in, but like I really need to maybe get a sense of the overall and like, okay, what is my end game here, and start like finding, like connecting the dots of like, okay, where do I want to end up in this house in my life? Like what's my end game, right? And then with the Virgo, Virgo is going to be relatively isolated. In other words, we haven't had any super major stuff going on in Virgo, not like we have in Taurus
Mhm.
and Capricorn. So it's going to be more concentrated. It's going to be like more like, okay, um, this part of the house needs like an update. It's kind of like when you update your software or you update your, whatever, like, just the other day I was like changing the batteries in my thermostat or whatever, like, the regular stuff that you just got to do. And if you don't do it regularly, guess what? It creeps up on you, and surprise, now you're forced to do it because, you know what I'm saying? And so
Mhm.
it's like, so you can like, and of course, I'm a Virgo moon, so like that. So like my approach is like, I always try to stay like 2 or 3 steps ahead of all that stuff because I'd rather be in charge of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Well,
yeah. And
and Virgos have been under renovation by a long-standing 2008 Pluto trine and Uranus 2018 May ingress into Taurus trining as well. But they're getting a softer edge. I mean, it's
yeah,
coming change Uranus and independence, freedom, and reinvention is coming at them in a softer way. And
yeah,
Pluto, deep transformation and rebirth as well, and crisis it can lead to it. They're getting it they're getting the easiest version of the earth signs of the influence of that Pluto and
absolutely,
Uranus
absolutely.
transit. So when
Yes.
Mercury does the elemental time for them this year, and we'll talk about the dates for the three major chunky retrogrades, and the time he's in there, I have my chart here. It's like my daughter's a Virgo rising, so I'll be watching this. They're getting kind of the best of all worlds. They're getting in like Mercury, elemental air, earth energy with this kind of tailwinds of Pluto and Uranus. And so it
Yeah,
feels
no, that's great. I like that way of looking at it. Yeah.
so I'm going to
Yeah.
just say the dates for the crew out there, so they're
Uh-huh.
aware of what we're talking about. So it is going to be December 6th to February 11th. So we're in the middle of it, recording today on December 20th, that we have a long stay of Mercury in Capricorn, and his retrograde window, just for the proverbial record, is December 29th to January 18th. Then later on in April 3rd to June 11th. That's what I have, but I could be wrong. It could be a day off or not, because I'm pretty loosey-goosey when I pick these dates out. But April 3rd to June 11th, he's in this sign of Taurus, and retrogrades around April 21st to May 14th. And I hope those dates are right. And then on July 28th, he's going to be till October 5th, is going through the sign of Virgo and retrograding the third week of August 23rd to September.
That's a long one, right? Like August, September,
That's
October.
insanely long. Yeah, like
Oh my God.
basically looking at August, September to October 5th. Like you can really count on the end of the summer. Hopefully,
Wow.
it's a good one. Being
Yeah.
in that long duration through
So
this.
like be aware that you're going to need to slow down, right? Because that's why it's so long, because it's slow. It's like slow, like,
Mercury moves slowly when he's retrograding, station
yeah,
retrograde. Yes, and that's why
yeah.
it's the other thing to say for the astronomically inclined. Planets, when they're getting ready to apparently go retrograde, or station to apparently go direct from our perspective on Earth, which is of course an optical illusion, it means the degrees that they're migrating through the sky are relatively slow. They're moving from our perspective slowly. And you're right, retrogrades and all of the time of these retrograde windows we mentioned, it doesn't serve us to rush.
No, my God, that's where we get into trouble. If we expect things to be same old, that's, expectation is the mother of disappointment, because it's not the same old. It's very different. And so if we're just rushing through things, that's a recipe for, not necessarily disaster. I mean, although the word disaster literally means going against, aster, stars, going
Oh my
against the
God,
stars.
I didn't know that. That's beautiful.
So like if you go against the stars, like you're setting yourself up for a disaster, right?
Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, that's cool. Well, I learned something new from you every time we chat. Well, the other thing with Mercury, he is the messenger for the dream realms. And so he
Yeah.
delivered dream messages during these windows that we just mentioned, during the retrograde most actively. So if you remember your dreams and you're listening during the retrograde periods, it doesn't matter if you're the signs that we mentioned, all signs will feel the retrogradation, to tune in and keep your eye on the dreams. There are a lot of, I had some of my most amazing, like life-changing dreams have happened when Mercury was retrograde.
Yeah, and Earth, the symbol for Earth in alchemy is a downward pointing triangle, right? Earth and water. All the interesting stuff about Earth and water is below the surface. You have to like dig down into, on the surface, Earth looks kind of boring, right? It's just like this brown flat thing. But when you start digging in there, you're like, oh, there's this white crystal and there's this green. Like I was just over at my buddy's house, and and we were walking along, he's got this green rock in his driveway, this big green rock. I'm like, oh my God, that's really cool. We're talking about this green rock, and then I start noticing all the different shades and sizes and gradations of the rocks. It's like, wow, like as soon as you get below the surface, you start to see there's an incredible variety, there's an incredible richness to what seemingly was flat and blah before. And so the metaphor here is that below represents the chakras below the heart, right? Like our gut, listening to our body and our instincts and what it's telling us during Earth years, I think will be very important because look, we were hunter-gatherers for many millions of years before we developed these big brains and became, like astronauts and all this other stuff, right? We had spidey senses that told us, hey, there's a saber-toothed tiger creeping up on you, dude, like run. And so, like really tuning into that stuff, and it may not be that dramatic, it can be very subtle, but tuning into like, wow, like, the subtle variations in your body's sensations and all of that stuff, that's really important during the earth years as well.
Do you think that the elemental earth year for the world will have anything to do with changes in currency, environment, and energy?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting, we had a little dust up last year where, there's one thing in particular that comes to mind. I wrote a piece for the Wellbeing Guide, which is an Australian publication, and I talked about this a little bit in there. So I just want to give a shout out to that. Cassandra Tyndall is the editor of that, and it's a really neat publication. And you can find it, Wellbeing Guide, if you just search for it or whatever. But
I can put a link to that article in the description box.
Okay, yeah. And one of the things I was talking about is like, hey, China's in the process of like creating these artificial islands. They're dredging up sand and creating new earth, new territories, and they're putting military stuff on these islands. And from outside looking in, it's like they're trying to like sort of block people from traveling through there. And the US is like, hey, this is international waters. We will be moving through here. And so like that seems like a setup for some tension, I mean, so that sort of thing, like where the earth literally is like, and that, that's really interesting because that's a very primordial, like in the Egyptian pantheon, Atum, the sun god, he literally, there was the Nile River, right? The primordial waters. And then there was this island that sort of rose up out of and Atum pulled himself up out of the primal waters, the sun god, and so there's this primal thing. On the one hand, it's kind of cool what they're doing, but politically and whatnot, it can be very tense. And so,
well, I'd like to add to that then, because I'm standing by this one, but with Uranus and Taurus, I've been waiting for the moment of like another Göbekli Tepe, another big discovery of something under the earth.
yeah.
And then you add to the elemental air year, the earth year, Mercury support for that this time around. And I know that we know there are underwater runes that no one has time to try to go dive for. And I know that we know there are mounds with things underneath it. So we know there's things under the earth that are historical and ancient, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, that has been uncovered and now shown to be 11,000 years old.
I mean, think about that, man. That really changes the timeline that that is a very fascinating find. And if you look at, they don't really have any idea what the hell is going on there. There's like vultures on it and stuff. So they think it might have been like an early kind of air burial, like the Tibetans do, where you bury the people and you would let the vultures.
No, Gary, don't talk to me about this shit. I go deep into this stuff. I'm a Graham Hancock woman. Look, no. An archaeologist type approach, besides it being, of course, just like Stonehenge, it is a delineation of different set points regarding the sky and the stars. There is that. The solstices, the star alignments, but it also, there's a stelae with these diagrams on it, and an astroarchaeologist dude discovered or figured out that he's 90% sure that they're constellations, and they're diagrammatically presented as animals, right? He says, so this looks just like this one, and look at the sky.
Proto zodiac, the
zodiac.
They have the same thing in the caves, Lori.
Right. So, but the thing is that so the biggest excitement for me is, because this is rewriting history. It goes to show the pyramids are probably much older, just as is Göbekli Tepe, because they can't carbon date the pyramids, etc. So bottom line is that it would be really cool and super exciting. So crossing my fingers, because I'm the girl who used to like von Heineken and Chariots of the Gods. But it would be very exciting to see. Uranus is dicking around in Taurus, and then Jupiter joins him, by the way, in 2024 April. That's going to be exciting. Uranus, Jupiter, and we're just going through this elemental earth energy over how many years now? I would love to see a big under the earth revelation of shock and awe that we have.
Would be fun. Yeah.
Like Atlantis, we find Atlantis.
It's really important to understand what you're talking about, though, that this is an ongoing thing. Like, we've learned so much stuff lately about, like, for instance, they've discovered that Neanderthals were not just primarily meat eating, you know, like they were pulses like beans and stuff. They were processing, pounding up, and this is many thousands, tens of thousands of years before we thought there was like this hard edge where there was like these meat eating, you know, hunter gatherers, and then there was these farmers. But it's not. It's like this long, slow evolution. Like even the Neanderthals were like pounding pulses and like having beans for
Well,
dinner.
and it's also interrupted evolution. So the younger Dryas period that happened like 12,000 years ago, 11,600 years ago, was a natural catastrophe. They're pretty well sure now from the molten glass bits that they're finding that only happen when a meteor hits the Earth and it's hot and it's molten and it sprays the shit out. And that's over in the in like Oregon. There's the scab lands. Anyway, new archaeological no, what am I saying? Like geological evidence is showing that we had a major catastrophe that set us back. So the ice was melting. We're coming out of an ice age, and suddenly it put us right back into another ice age for 1,000 years, I think. And after that, things began to, then there was the flood. There really was a flood as a part of this natural catastrophe. The long story short of all of that is that things that we don't know happened, like we didn't know there was a natural disaster then, set humanity back. And so there's a theory in the sort of far out crew, but now becoming more mainstream, that the survivors are the ones that seeded these things like Göbekli Tepe and other places with astronomical codes in the stones so that that knowledge would be preserved.
Yeah, that's a very common story actually, Laurie, that a lot of the Hermetic knowledge supposedly came from Persia, came from Babylon. And it like we think of Egypt as the birthplace of a lot of this Hermetic stuff, but actually there are myths that say it came from Babylon and was sent to Egypt, and then it came back to the Middle East, right?
Absolutely.
So, and they sent it there to encode it in the temples, carved it into the, you know, the obelisk and whatnot. So I don't see why. I mean, if that story is around, you know, in that context, I don't see why it couldn't be in the context you're talking about. But yeah, there was one other thing I was going to say, like, you know, yeah. So, and it's important to understand, you know, with all of this stuff where, you know, the news is constantly catastrophizing everything. And it's like, I think it's a psyop to like keep you stressed out so you don't actually think for yourself, and like you're just on emotional autopilot. That's, you know, but hey, I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist, but you know, that's one way of subjugating people, right? Just keep them in this lower part of Maslow's hierarchy, right? Where they're just concentrating on their survival needs and they don't ever like think about the higher evolution stuff, right?
Sure, if you keep the population in a fight, flight, and freeze mode.
Yeah, exactly.
No
But
way
it's important to remember, like as a species, we have survived some incredibly harsh conditions. I mean, they're pretty sure that there was a population bottleneck. Like the people that are here on Earth now are all so related that it seems like as if, and I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but you kind of have to just, but that the global population, which is now what, like 8 billion, was in the thousands, Lori. The global populations of humans was in the thousands. And we had our backs to the wall. We were very close to being extinct, but we made it through. And this is where all of the stories of like the journey of the hero, the journey of the heroine, that comes spontaneously emerges out of our psyche, because that's who we are. We are dramatically heroic species. We've been through some incredibly traumatic events and came out the other side, you know, with bigger and better things, you know. And so I think that's one thing, like that's the foundation, like Earth, right? That's the foundation of who we are. We're survivors. We make it through. We're the ones who made it.
And we could say even more than survivors, we could even be thrivers. And one of the things
absolutely
that showing up, like hopefully in 2023, because of the Pluto Aquarius piece especially, is the movement towards sustainable, renewable, easy, and maybe free energy. And as much as that seems far-fetched, and I don't think it's the cold fusion the United States just announced, I think it's more to do either with sound technologies or quantum foam, harnessing the quantum foam. But there's a lot of invested money that doesn't want that to happen. Obviously, the
Right.
product industry, and and all the
Petroleum,
invest in the war machinery as well. It doesn't
right.
serve anyone for us to suddenly not be fighting over energy resources.
Well, that's why a lot of people say Tesla, lost out to Edison, right? Because Edison commercialized it and Tesla wanted to give it away for free.
Oh,
you know.
absolutely. He was betrayed by Edison. And we're talking about Nikola Tesla, you guys, Nikolai Tesla or whatever, Nikola. Anyway, he was the guy who would have actually gotten us way ahead in our energy had he not been basically sabotaged by Edison. So we could go on forever, but we got to get back. Which is the point is that get ready for an elemental Earth year that Gary and I suggest may have some shifts with the, I think, things under the ground showing up, more focus on resources, energy, and also with the cryptocurrency collapse, as the air energy was losing steam, right? It was like falling down as the Mercury was finishing his air energy action. And of course, Mars and Gemini didn't help either, which is part of why the crypto markets may have plunged a bit. I don't think crypto will be what it ever was. I don't know what it will be. I think the blockchain technology
really
is important,
interesting.
but I don't think the speculation on cryptocurrencies is happening anymore.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder about that myself, because this particular cycle, Bitcoin did behave differently than it has in any of the other ones, right? It didn't have this big blow off top. It had two smaller tops. And then when it came back down, it went below the previous high, which it's never done before. Now, it didn't go that far below. So I think it has changed somewhat in that it's become institutionalized, and anytime you institutionalize something, it does change it. How much it's changed it, I don't know. Like, if there's another dramatic drop in the price, I'm gonna say they broke it, and I'm gonna say they broke it on purpose, because now they want to introduce their digital, US dollar digital whatever, and they want to train everybody on that, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the whole FTX scandal with the trading platform collapsing, well, of course, there was speculation it was like an operation, that was to actually create a reason for.
Well, he was up there buddying up with everybody in Congress, and
the SEC and all of that.
Yeah, and Joe Biden, and like, he was like giving all this money to Joe Biden and all this stuff, like, so. Yeah, like, and of course, look, we're talking about money, man. We're talking about, like, the government has a monopoly on money. They have a monopoly on money creation. Well, they did until these crypto guys started printing money. And like, guess what? If somebody's got a monopoly on something and you start messing with that, they're gonna mess with you back, right? That's like gangster 101.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're not going gently into the good night. And so it will be interesting to see, like, do they can, but here's the thing, they cannot destroy crypto, and because then the whole platform on which their digital currency is going to be built would be meaning, right? So they have to let it live in order to have the digital dollar. But I mean, assuming that they want to keep their monopoly, which, they would have to, like, make sure that it's like a, not a full competitor, right? No, nobody.
I think they're going to just try to regulate it into a place where it's not as attractive,
right,
as it used to be, where it was about, decentralization, and people.
Here's the thing about that, Lori. Yes, they may be able to do that. They may, in fact, succeed in doing that. But so you're talking about, like, all the layer one, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all. Like, I'm working with guys that are creating, like, these other stuff that's built upon Ethereum, like these metaverse tokens and all this stuff. Like, these things still have the capability of doing like 100 or 1,000x, these smaller things. But now not everybody will know about it. So you have to, like, think about what I was saying about Earth. What do you have to do? You have to dig down below the surface to find the really cool stuff. So I think that with respect to what you're saying, yeah, that it's sensible. What you're saying makes perfect sense. But at the same time, if you dig down a couple layers below and you start getting involved in projects that are just in their genesis now, in
Mhm.
2 or 3 years when there will be another up cycle.
No, I
It
agree,
may
but I
not
think,
be as
I think
dramatic.
those new tokens are kind of like, after Betamax died, along came VHS. I mean, the base technology that is blockchain won't go away.
Right.
I mean, Bitcoin was supposed to be a gold hedge, like gold, a hedge, and then Ethereum is supposed to be useful, and you can use it.
Right.
But the other thing is that Mercury's going through Capricorn December 6th to February 11th, and the guy who crashed FTX, Fried Bankman, Bankman Fried or Fried Bankman, I can't remember which order to put his last name, Max. Even he's been pulled back from the Bahamas to testify or to go to court or whatever they're going to do with the poor guy, because he may have just been a pawn. But the thing is that you're going to see, like, Mercury's in Capricorn. Capricorn is established governing bodies and ruling
Right.
money systems, and whatever things
The
are going to
system,
happen.
the man.
Yeah, like, this is going to be a time in which by, I think, February 11th, we're going to see a really important story emerging regarding the aftermath of FTX and what it will look like in terms of whether the government can indeed try
Right.
to use this as a springboard for control.
Right. Yeah. Well, the other thing you have, Lori, is you have, Ripple, which is one of the top 10 cryptos that maybe not everybody knows about. Like, you can't even buy it on Coinbase, for instance, because they're involved in a lawsuit with the SEC. The SEC has been enforcing regulations through lawsuits. In other words, they haven't given us any guidelines of, like, this is what you can and can't do. They just say, oh, by the way, you did something you're not supposed to, now we're going to sue you, but they don't tell you until after you've done it, right? So that's what they did to Ripple. And Ripple's winning that lawsuit by a lot of people's accounts. Now, if Ripple wins that lawsuit, that's going to be kind of a counterweight to what you're talking about with the FTX thing, because that's going to open up, so basically what the SEC is saying is that, and I think what a lot of the Bitcoin maxis, Bitcoin maximalists are people who think that Bitcoin is the only real crypto and all this other stuff is like, like ripoffs of whatever. But because Bitcoin is truly decentralized. I mean, there's a lot to drill into, and you talk about going down layers and getting into all the little.
But don't you think, though, with Mercury in charge of markets, like, and with all the earth he's going through, that this is going to be a really big.
Absolutely. So yeah, but what I'm saying is it could go either way, because the FTX thing could go one way, the Ripple thing could go another way. And so it's like, it's going to be really interesting to see, because, like, if the SEC were to say Bitcoin is a commodity, like it is digital gold, and all of these other things are securities, well, that's going to change the space a lot. Whereas if they actually give, functional definitions of, like, okay, this is what defines a security. And by this definition, this one, that one, and the other one are securities. This one, that one, and the other, you're in some gray areas. You better, like, do this, that, or the other to get out of that. If you want to get, like, that would be the best of all worlds if they actually give some, or they could just be like, just broad brushstrokes and be like, all that stuff's a security, and, like, we're just going to regulate the hell out of it and basically strangle it, right?
I expect that by the end of 23, we're going to see a significant redirection and change in what the cryptos markets and crypto regulation and crypto story is becoming.
Yeah, and when you start to look at the Bitcoin chart, Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency, and that chart is foundational. And so what's going on right now is that Pluto is transiting the Jupiter of that chart.
Oh, I saw that.
The last degree, okay? Then Pluto is going to transit what? The Mercury of that chart when it gets into Aquarius. And by the way, Bitcoin has got an incredible Mercury, because why? Mercury's the god of coin, man. He's the god of commerce. Of course, it's got a kick-ass Mercury. Satoshi knew what the heck he was doing. And, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, by the way, but I am a fan. Like, Satoshi, like, this is incredible stuff. The possibilities.
It is incredible stuff. And I don't think that the Bitcoin will die, but I think that the whole way, we'll see. I just feel like the forces of regulation are coming down hard. And I don't know that that will make Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the currencies particularly alluring. And also, there was a rational exuberance. There was overinflation. That's all that air Mercury stuff that was happening, elemental air.
Yeah, it always is.
There always is. And it's like the tip
yeah.
of the tech bubble crash back in the day.
Yeah.
2000, 2001.
It's the nature of the beast. It's what it does.
Yeah, everything came down to, like, the bottom of what is the possible range for a stock, and then whatever survived, and whatever didn't. And so it's
Right.
also, it's a natural process. It's a cycle of all new best things that are coming out. And we're going to go and do all signs now, but when you talk about metaverse, I'm pretty sure Saturn in Pisces is going to be the beginning of
Oh, yeah.
form and structure and reality to that Neptune in Pisces. It's been there forever without any help. And I actually
Yeah.
like the Saturn Neptune piece, because I think
Yes. Oh, it seems so much, because Saturn in Aquarius has been so rigid. It's been like, oh no, this is absolutely true and nothing else could even
Saturn
be
Aquarius has
questioned.
been rules, restrictions.
Yeah, oh my God, man, it's been so rigid, and that, like, a little fluidity, please, yeah, like multiple things can be true at one time. Hello, you know, and
Yeah,
and,
no,
and
I know it was brutal. It was so brutal for
yeah,
the world. We're talking, guys, about the pandemic restrictions, lockdowns, rules, regulations, and that's how it turned out that Saturn was operating after he hit the Pluto Capricorn conjunction, which can bring plagues. After he
well,
moved,
yeah, they tell us to trust science. Meanwhile, they're being blatantly anti-scientific. They're saying, no, 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 it absolutely naturally occurred, right? There's no way that it came
oh,
from that
that's
lab.
now
And if
disputed
you
by
say
science.
that, you're a racist. It's like, wait, what?
No,
How
but
the hell can you
that's
even
changed,
know?
right? The whole lab leak theory now is now becoming mainstream accepted.
Right, but they tried to like kill it by saying, no, if you say that, you're a racist or you're a conspiracy
I
theorist,
know they
right?
tried to kill it. Absolutely.
You know what I'm
Yep.
saying? And it's like, that's completely anti-scientific. The scientific viewpoint is we don't know. We have no idea, but we're going to systematically test it to try to find out. That's not what they did at all, right? It was very rigid. Like, no, this is the one truth and you must accept it and you must do what we tell you regarding it. And like very authoritarian, man, pretty scary stuff.
It was pretty
You know,
scary.
so
I think that long-standing, never seemingly ending Uranus square to Saturn was what we saw. We saw freedom fighting, rebellion, iconoclast trying to break free of the rigidity straitjacket, and what looked like, a science becoming part of a totalitarian regime.
right.
Okay, dude, because I've got a YouTube video
Yes,
live.
yes, yes. Okay.
Now we're going to go through the sign. So
Yes.
you and I have to stop talking about ancient
All right,
astronomy.
all right.
Okay, so
Okay.
we're going to go through all of the signs. This is your time, guys, and I will have all this timestamp for all of us. So, if some people will jump ahead and not watch us riff, but for those of you who are here just for your sign, because that's what you really wanted anyway, we're going to talk about you in an elemental air year from the perspective of your rising sign is always
Sure.
most accurate. If you don't know your rising sign, check my description box. There's a free tutorial on how to cast your chart on astro.com and whole sign houses. To find your rising sign, you'll need a birth time. Otherwise, you can secondarily listen for your sun and moon. So I'm going to pass the baton to Gary. How do you want to proceed through the signs?
Well, we talked quite a bit about Capricorn. I mean, that would be the natural place to start, I guess.
Oh, no, you can't start at Capricorn. You have to
No?
start with Aries.
Okay. Hey, that suits me.
The
I mean,
strange reason I'm telling you that, not because I have 4 planets in Aries,
okay,
because
so
because in YouTube land, when people listen to this on the premiere or whatever, and they see you're at Capricorn, they think they missed it and they get confused. People only
okay. All right. Okay. So we'll start with Aries. So for Aries, Capricorn is the 10th sign. Moving forward from Aries, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you get to Capricorn, yeah? So the 10th sign is what we call the midheaven. It occupies the middle of the sky above, and so it's the highest section. And so it generally represents career, because career is like that thing for which you are known in the world, right? It's your visible public life, if you will. Okay. And so, like we said about all the stuff that's going on and been going on in Capricorn, Aries has had a major renovation going on in their career, huge renovations. And so what I was talking about before is now it's time to put the trim work on that, like all of this stuff that you've been ripping out and putting back in. Okay, now it's time to like, okay, I'm gonna sew this up and get this tightened up, because after this elemental year of Earth, which is it's like the next 4 retrogrades, granted it's not just one and done, there will be 2 of them in Capricorn. There'll be another one at this time next year. So it's not like the absolute deadline. I'm not putting that kind of pressure on you, but there is something with regard to your career or your public persona that needs to get finished up. It needs to start putting the finishing touches on it.
Yeah. And then because it's the way Mercury's whipping through that sky, right? He's also going to impact the Taurus zone of the chart, which will be happening in the month of April through June. And that's all
Right.
about the earnings and show me the money, don't you think?
The second house, yeah. And so I call this Trigon the Trigon of mastery, because the second house is your resources, both tangible like money
Mhm.
or property or knowledge, for instance, is a more intangible form. Like I said, all of us as human beings have this incredible ability to survive and thrive that's built into our genes. We've survived cataclysms, right? That's who we are. That's a resource that we have. And so
Mm.
it's good to remember that,
Mm.
and so the Taurus represents the resources, and then Virgo represents the sixth house, which is like what you do with those resources, and what you do on a regular basis is like your habits, and your habits become skills, and your skills become your career. So you see how these three are related? That's why I call it the Trigon of mastery. You have resources, then you have what you do with those resources over and over and over again, and that leads to being known in the public and so forth.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I like that you created those names for them. Yeah, so all the fire signs will be working with the Trigon of Mastery this year. Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, that's a great overview. And then later on, just to add to that, because we got to go through all signs, but when you're in that sixth house mode with Mercury down the pipeline, which is July 28th to October 5th, I sometimes find that little bit of transit time, it's a long time now with Mercury there. I often find myself wanting to research, learn, or study something that's going to apply to my career. I mean, because I have a lot of Aries in me, so I'm really familiar with any Mercury in the sixth. So just a thought that it could in the
Skill
map.
building. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty, so we got through Aries. So we're doing okay. Anything last things? I think we can pull this off in the next 35 minutes.
All right, cool.
Any
Cool.
last thoughts,
All
or
right.
should we go on to Taurus people?
Yeah, we can go on to Taurus. I feel
Okay.
good.
So yay, us Aries, Trigon of mastery and our focus on career, resources, money, and the way we use that money and our career knowledge and wisdom. Taurus.
Right. So Taurus is 9 signs, Capricorn is 9 signs ahead of Taurus, right? So it's the ninth house. The ninth house is the house of God. In other words, like religion, right? But specifically patriarchal type religion, like in other words, in the patriarchal church, if you want to go, you have to go on this long sojourn to get to the church. Whereas in the goddess religions, the church was like in the field across the street, right? But there's this long, what do they call it when you go to Mecca or whatever? Like
Pilgrimage.
the pilgrimage, yeah. You have to go on this pilgrimage as part of your religious identity. And so it's the house of long distance travel, as well as religion, as well as publishing. And what am I missing here, Lori?
Well,
Publishing,
sometimes courts
foreign
with
cultures, courts, yes, legal matters, yeah.
I find that in the ninth house, deeply underneath all of these meanings, it has to do with the like books are knowledge and wisdom pieces, and judges are supposed to be wise, and God is supposed to know it all. So really, there's a call to wisen up, when things
Yeah.
are going through our ninth house.
And usually wisening up means broadening our perspective, right? Right? So it's again, like we talked about before, if the first house is your hats that you put on and your different identities, right? When you put on a new hat, then you have these creative options that open up for you. And when you play with these creatively, it opens up new perspectives. It opens up new horizons. So the new horizons is the ninth house. And generally speaking, whether you come at it from like that perspective, or if you come at it from like what you were saying, generally speaking, broadening your perspective is going to bring wisdom and bring, it's going to make you more just, more godlike,
Yeah. And then it is an identity trigon for the Taurians through the earth
right?
people, right? So they're really focused on a change of perspective about themselves as well, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. All of their different roles, there may be some roles that they no longer need. They're, like I'm kind of done with that. And there may be some roles that they really need to go ahead, that they've been kind of putting off and not wanting to deal with. And it's like, no, you know, because Taurus can be kind of stubborn, right? I know I've got Mars in Taurus, so I'm guilty as charged. But it's like, you know, it's not, and what happens is like, we like to take our time, right? We want to do it in our own time. And so it's like, yeah, I'll get to that. And then people keep saying, hey, what about this? What about, and it builds up this pressure. It's like, no, I'm not going to do it because you're telling me to. I'm going to do it when I feel like you know what I'm saying? Like when it feels right for me. And so then it builds up this resistance of no, I'm not going to do it because because everyone's telling me to. I'm absolutely not going to do it. And then at some point you have to kind of just throw that off and be like, okay, I'm just going to do it, even if everybody's telling me to do it and it's not, but I am going to try to find within that like some part of my own timing with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, you know, because the Taurus themselves will experience the Mercury transit through the house of their identity, will be, you know, a long one too, actually, April like 3rd to June 11th. There is that window where a lot of this, if you had resistance to a new role or you weren't sure about, you know, or you're stubbornly, you know, blocking or something, like Tauruses are fixed signs. This is where you're going to find some serious reconsideration, Mercury retrograde in the house of you, your identity. And, you know, I mean, you know, the ninth house and the first and the fifth can bring prosperity in Indian astrology, the Lakshmi house. Also, some of your choices may be actually very good for your thrival. You know, even though you're resisting them, these are what you need in order to be more in a sense of lush abundance within your life.
Right. Yeah.
And what about that fifth house part 2 in the fall? What do you think of that for them when the Virgo?
So the fifth house is about taking risks. You know, it's about taking creative risks. Like, okay, I can afford to spend some time or money or something. It's about spending, it's about releasing energy, right? So like so you have to ask yourself, where do I want to invest my time and energy? What is it that I want? And that comes back to your values, right? And so so it's
do I have any joy here? You know, I mean,
yeah,
we're just
exactly.
going to ask that fifth house question. Like that's kind of like September, October. You know, are you having any fun here, guys? You know, Mercury likes to have fun. And the fifth house, is 2 months in the fifth house there. You're going to really question, is this enjoyable? Where's my spark of enjoyment?
Right. Yeah. Does this feel good? Am I getting any juicy, like, you know, tidbits out of this, or is it just kind of like rote repetition or whatever, you know?
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting time for my Taurus son daughter. I'll be watching for her. All right, we'll keep going in because we want to get all signs done. I'll be leaving Gary to finish without me, and I'll be going off to do something else. So should we start with the Gemini, the air people?
Yeah. So Gemini, the Capricorn is 8 signs ahead of Gemini, and so the 8th house is a very interesting place because it's that part of the day where it's like mid-afternoon where like these long shadows start coming across, and it's like it's too late in the day to start anything new, but it's not like time to like call it a day and just like go hang out and have a beer with your friends or whatever. Right. So it's like
no, you're wrong. The 8th house is wine o'clock. You get to be a menopausal woman in your 50s and 60s. We're like, it's 4 o'clock. Is it time for wine yet?
Well, yeah, like actually in a lot of cultures, they would have a siesta, they would have an afternoon break, right? But that's in Western cultures, we don't necessarily have that, you know? So the 8th house gets this reputation of being this idle place of like this place where it's neither here nor there, right? But it has to do with if the 2nd house is like your resources, both tangible and intangible, the 8th house is the 2nd house from the 7th, right? So it's your partner's resources and or other people's resources. And an extension of that is just like collective resources. So the 8th house has to do with the occult, for instance, because occult things are not owned by anybody, right? Like they belong, like the occult realm, the astral realm, if you will, belongs to everyone, you know? And so now, you know, if you've ever, well, I'm not going to say anything snarky there, but you wouldn't think so, judging by the way some people act about it. But anyway, it is this sort of collect. So there's this, you know, sex, other people's money, death, taxes, all of these kind of areas that are really loaded and intense. It's a very intense house, right? And Gemini tends to like to stay on the surface of things, and they don't necessarily want to be tied down with the when intensity is about depth. It's about getting in there and getting really down to the juicy bottom of something. That's not exactly Gemini's favorite place. Like, they like to flit around and just keep it light and keep it cool, right? So it might be challenging in that regard, but if you can dig into that a little bit, it's going to, because the 8th house is, right, part of a trigon that involves the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th.
What do you call that trigon for your naming of?
I call it the trigon of dynasty, because the 4th house is the family, but it's the end of the matter, is what you hear in a lot of these texts. The end of the matter. It's like what you leave behind. It's like your dynasty, what you leave to the next generation. And so there's this collective feeling about these houses, right? The family, right? The family home. It doesn't just belong to you. You're going to leave it to someone, and you got it from someone, right? And the 8th house is like, it's the stuff you share with your partners, both marriage partners and business partners, by the way. 8th house would still apply to business partners, right? Shared resources. And then the 12th house is like your sort of your spiritual family, right? Like, it's sort of like, which is really humanity, So there's this, if Gemini can like be willing to slow down and go a little deeper, they'll find an incredible richness and connection of various types of family that can where they can find that they are welcome to do their Gemini thing, but it's like, here's like 3 different areas where I can just be comfortable to be me, and I can be sort of nested in being me without feeling like I have to flit every single place and do it all at once. It's kind of a little more focused ability to.
I know what you're saying about the Geminis flitting around like that. And it's an interesting thought, because houses 12 and 8 are in aversion to Gemini, and they're both very deep houses. And houses 4, 8, and 12 are moksha houses for spiritual liberation in the Indian philosophy.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, it's like we don't take time for spiritual liberation. And in India, they'd say the 4th house energies you divest from, you liberate from the family ancestral stories. And in the 8th house, you can liberate from your cloistered identity as a me. And in the 12th house, you go full Monty into Buddhahood. But the gist of it is that these are very esoteric, subtle, deep. And for Gemini, 12 and 8 are in aversion or hidden from view. So this is almost like a call by Mercury for the Geminis in the world, rising especially, to really stop the presses a bit and look at their soul. Yeah.
Yes.
And I know a Gemini rising who's a Mason and got really deep into the esoterica of Masonry lately. And I would guess that something about his journey there will deepen over 2023.
Oh yeah. And that's a pretty incredible journey. There's a lot of history and a lot of, and there's a lot of branches that branch off from. You can't just be a Mason, right? There's the Rosicrucians that are sort of related, and there's these different, the Golden Dawn. A lot of the Golden Dawn cats were Masons before they started the Golden Dawn and whatever.
God, of course. And the founding fathers of the United States were Masons, and they knew what they were up to when they made the Sibley chart. So yeah, I mean, when they signed that declaration with Jupiter exalted and the sun on Sirius, the dog star. I mean, this was all planned. So yeah, totally cool stuff. So I'm going to say to all of you Geminis to round you up in the dynasty Trigon to take some time out for your soul. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Very well said.
All righty, let's keep rolling into the watery Cancer poke, and maybe even start by telling us what a water trigon people, like how this works for them, the trigon of the earth.
Right. So earth and water have an interesting relationship. You might hear them like snarking at each other a little bit, like the water person says, "Oh, you're always trying to tie me down, and you're always like you always want the same old thing, like, blah, blah, blah." And the earth person is like, "Well, I never know where, what mood you're going to be in, or like, I never know, like, blah, blah." And so there's this formlessness. Water has no form of its own. Yeah. It'll take on the form of whatever container it encounters, and earth is that container. So they have this symbiotic relationship that Earth can feel like constricting to the water in a way, but it also, it gives it form. And so there's this interesting relationship where if you can deeply appreciate someone who holds fast, and they are like that absolute port in a storm where no matter what, you can always go to them, and they're always going to be that rock that you can count on, right? But there are times when that gets a little boring, right? And you might be like, oh, I want to sail off to like some exotic island harbor, like I don't want this rock, and so there'll be like that's sort of the dynamic that you deal with between earth and water. And this is specifically, it does have to do with partnerships with Cancer, because Capricorn is the opposite sign, right? So it's the 7th house of partnerships, and that's not just romantic partnerships, it's business partnerships, best friends. Lawyers are in the 7th house because lawyers are your best friend in court, for instance. So it's one-on-one relationships, basically. And so you have these like one-to-one relationships, and then in the 11th house, right? So the other earth sign, if we go Capricorn, right? And then we move into Taurus, is the 11th house for Cancer. That's like intra-group relationships. So it's relationships within a group. So I can still have like a one-on-one relationship with certain astrologers, but it's within the context of whatever group. Like, there's a lot of people, like I work with Astrology Hub, for instance, and that's a whole group. And like I have the relationship with that group, right? And then there's like the astrology community as a whole, where it's like intergroup relationships. That's more like the 3rd house, which is the Virgo house for Cancer. The 3rd house, like literally, what does the 3rd house is like your local neighborhood, but what is the neighborhood made of? It's made up of all these various households and ethnicities and cultures, and they all come together. So it's literally intergroup, like relationships between groups. So you have like these 3 kinds of relationships: the one-to-one, the within group, and the between group relationships that are being fired off this year. So the whole thing is about relationships of different kinds. And you might
So
find,
what do you call that one? So we had the dynasty trigon.
it's the relationship trigon.
Yeah. Oh, the relationship trigon. Okay.
Yeah. And so you might find that one kind of relationship wants to naturally evolve into another kind. You might find that this group relationship that I've established myself in this group. I have all these relationships within this group, and like there's this other group that's kind of similar interests, and I want them to meet all my friends in this group. I want the 2 groups to get along. I want all my friends to get along. And so there would be this interesting, thing going on there. Or you might find that you meet someone in a group context and you go, hey, I would like to spend some time with you one-on-one. Like, would you like to come hang out and, stargaze or do whatever, and so you can find that these relationships would naturally flow from one form into another, perhaps. And you might find that, if you could simultaneously feel bored or restricted by a relationship, but at the same time, like knowing that it serves as some kind of foundation or some kind of container that is very safe and stable for you. And so so there's this tension of like, how do I keep growing, but and without giving up the safety of this container, but still be able to move about and flow and take on different shapes and stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like how you said that. And, and the relating qualities of those houses. I mean, and the 3rd house includes our close ones, like our childhood friendships maybe formed in school when we were younger, and our siblings as well. And so that 3rd house placement, which is the last spot that things land, really, which is kind of interesting, which would be when is the end of that story? Yeah, like July 28th to October 5th. I even think about my sister, who's a Cancer rising, will likely be spending time with me in August next year as we drive together across the country. I'm going to lure her to drive with me.
You'll be stuck in a car together.
Yeah, we're stuck in a car together, dealing with our relationship as Mercury is going to be moving around, retrograding, going direct back and forth.
Wow.
But yeah, like the trigon of relationship is up for a renovation, reinvention, renewal, and all of that for you Cancers.
Yes.
How exciting is that? Very cool. Very cool. All right, we're going to do the Leonines. They're back in the
fire trigon.
back in fire.
Fire. So fire, once again, we're talking about the Trigon of mastery, right? So the sixth house, Capricorn is 6 signs ahead of Leo. So the sixth house is our day-to-day routines. And I like to talk about the magic of the everyday when it comes to the sixth house. Like, did you ever get down on your hands and knees and like in a field of grass and like look down like way at the bottom, and there's like these bug skeletons and like these little mushrooms, and like it's a whole nother world underneath there, and it's like a world that you never really pay attention to because you're usually just walking over it and you never see it. So there's like this, the magic of the microcosm, the magic of the everyday. Like there's power in routine. Routine is where we build our skills from. It's where, if you have a good routine, you end up with good health, right? If you repeat good things that, if you eat good foods and exercise and do the good things for your health, you end up with, right? If you do things that are not so great for you, that your body doesn't like, then, you're going to have problems, right? So it's like so how do we manage to, like, because fire signs, similar to what we were saying with Gemini, fire likes to move, fire likes to flow, fire is one of it's always in motion. So how can I capture the magic of the everyday and build stable patterns that allow me to build skills and without becoming bored or feeling restricted and so forth, right? And the way to do that is by really diving into the magic of it. Oh, so like I remember like when I was studying architecture, for instance, there's like this one guy, he just drew squares over and over again, and then he painted the inside square one color and the outside square another color, and by manipulating the different colors between the squares, he could make it starts with a B. It's I'm trying to think of his name. It's a really famous study, but it's like the most repetitious thing. You just square, 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 but by changing the colors, you could make the square jump out or recede. And it was all this stuff that he learned about colors through doing this rote repetition, And so there's magic in the everyday if you can kind of tolerate the sort of, same old of it, and still find the magic in it.
Yeah, and the sixth house used to be called the house of slavery. Think of serfdom, slavery, duty, and drudgery. And so finding the magic in the daily, and Mercury is the magical magician. So this could really open up some enchantment with the everyday.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then, that again, when you build skills, when you become good at something, then it gets you noticed, right? So by doing that, by cultivating the magic of the everyday, you're investing in your, you're going to get to the stage, Leo, but you just got to do the work first, right?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And then, of course, it hits that 10th house, so all that work in the everyday leads to the adoption of, that two months that Mercury's in your 10th house in April, May, and June. So
yeah, get the payoff. And then it comes back to the second house, which is about resources and what things do I want to build skills around? What resources do I want to focus on? Because as I said, we are incredibly resourceful, species. But we have, thousands and hundreds and millions of years of evolution to call on, right? And so there's so many things, there's so many possibilities that we could be, but we have to make a choice. Like, what is it I want? You can't have everything, but if you make a choice and if you dial that, and that's Earth is like particularizing it, right? So like, I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to repeat that over and over again until I master it. And then I'm going to get the recognition for it. And I'm going to,
absolutely. And with the second house ending, kind of the grand finale really is kind of August, September for the gist of it. It's like, how do you want to use that Mercury and that resources, earnings, possessions, and speech house, that it's now been working its way toward the final finale, which is about your money stories or your resources or your things that you need for, surviving, hopefully thriving. So that's kind of cool.
Right.
We're doing good. We're keeping it at a clip. I can go a little over my deadline, so we won't worry about it as much.
Okay.
I just tell people I'll be a bit late. So Leos, get ready for that. It's a very resourceful version of mastery for you. Could really up your resources. And how about the Virgos? I know so many Virgos. I'm surrounded by Virgos. Virgo
Yeah,
rising.
it's kind of like a cosmic joke that, Virgo's fun house is Capricorn, right? Poor things like that, they're like, oh,
I know.
what are we gonna do for fun? We're gonna organize. But yeah, it's like, it's the fifth house. It's like creativity, fun, and so structure, organization.
Oh my God, can you just stop the presses? One of my Virgo rising friends, her idea of fun is just smoke a joint and then organize and clean her house.
Right, yeah, totally, right. But
There's a
yeah,
joint in there. See, the point is the joint makes it fun. Maybe, like I'll have some serious fun right now. I'm going to organize with a joint.
yeah. Or for me, it would be like I would add in, like, put on my iPod, and listen to my favorite tunes and whatnot, and like, so that, vacuuming or mopping or whatever, like dusting, whatever, it becomes like, you dancing while you're doing it, and you're having fun.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the fifth house is really about creativity, and it's about release of energy, right? So it's also the house of romance, Virgo. So you might find that, like, if you're paying attention, you might find that you're attracted to people you maybe didn't think you wanted to be attracted to. It might be a little something strange going, wait, what's that feeling? That's like, I'm attracted to them? Seriously? It could happen, because that's the nature of the retrograde, is it's going to show you things you didn't expect.
Right, because
So
because Virgos are in the identity trigon. It all comes
yeah,
back to who are you really?
yeah, exactly. And so you might find, and it might be, again, it might be a new a new artist. That attraction need not be romantic. It might be like, oh, there's this art. Wait, that's like, oh, that's from that school. Like, I always thought that school was ridiculous, but like I like this. So maybe now I need to take a closer look at this whole movement, because that I was blowing off, because like I had that recently with, like, there's this oldies station locally that plays like, and it was playing like the Go-Go's, like from back in the day, like the bubblegum pop, but I was listening to the song, I was like, that's a really good song, man. I blew it off back in the day, because I thought, oh, like, whatever, we got the beat or whatever, but it was the other one. It was the Our Lips Are Sealed or whatever. There's a really interesting message in that song, but I totally never got it, because I was just seeing it on the surface,
Right.
of, and so, like, if you actually pay attention to the details, right, like a good Virgo, you'll see, like, whoa, there's something going on underneath the surface here that I actually kind of like, and that feels fun and creative, and like, whoa, like, what else can I do with that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it is the house of creativity. So you would be detailed, creative, and reinventing here because of the retrogradation, looking at things
Yeah.
new.
Yeah,
And
and of course that opening up those creative channels, which is really just a flow of chi, right? It's a flow of energy through the chakras, from the bottom to up through the higher chakras, right into your heart. Your heart is the center of your creativity, and that's why romance feels, it's so, it opens us up so much, because when our heart is open, like, everything, literally everything is possible, but that's literally like just energy moving through your body. So if you can, so when you raise that energy and you begin to open your heart to things that maybe you didn't think about before, then woo, that if that energy makes it to, it's mind-blowing, right? It's like, whoa, like, all these things are like, I never saw it that way before, and there's like these, that would be the ninth house, right? And then it brings, because I've seen the universe anew, wow, I can be somebody different if I want to. Like, I don't have to be that person that was stuck in whatever before I found out this new really cool thing. And so that's exciting, it's an exciting kind of
especially the epiphanous nature of the ninth house in general. And then you add
yeah,
Uranus up there, North Node right now. And the real,
right.
like, yeah, you could definitely come to, like, this is like your identity shifting, but it's, through this potential for some aha revelation, epiphany as well.
Yes, yeah. So Yeah, have some fun, Virgo, and have some fun in ways that you wouldn't have expected it to be fun. Like if somebody like invites you to do something and you're typically like, oh, I don't do that, do it anyways. See if you can make it fun and see
Exactly.
what, yeah, see what happens from there.
Because it all goes back to you at the very end when Mercury spends the tail end of the story, end of July through to October 5th in your house. So he finishes with a flourish of, and it's all about you.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Anyway, we shouldn't laugh at the
For once, Virgos get to have it to be all about them. Yeah,
yes, I
nice.
do. At the very tail end, it's all about them. But we shouldn't laugh at their fifth house Capricorn problem. That's kind of funny, but
It's cute. I think it's cute. Yeah.
so cute. I mean, I'm surrounded by Virgos, so I know exactly how they operate with that one. All right, Libra.
Yeah.
Libras, we have to keep rolling. Libra.
Yeah, so Libra is a cardinal sign, so this is an angular house for them. It's the fourth house of home and family and ancestry, land, right? All of this, we
Dynasty.
get back to the trigon of dynasty. What are you going to leave behind when your journey on this earth is done? That's the real question of the fourth house. It's not a question that, I mean, how many people are going around out there, they don't have a will, they're past like, look, once you get past 50, like, you're on borrowed time. You just don't know when your time is up, man. And so, like, how many people are going around there without a will or without any kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying like you have to, like Libra, you have to write a will. I'm just saying like that awareness of like past the day to day to more of like a transgenerational perspective of like, or even zooming out to like the 7 generations idea of like,
Or
I'm
even
part of
looking,
this chain.
or even looking more deeply in this journey through the dynasty energies, because it's starting in Capricorn, at the roots that formed you. You're
Yes.
standing
Yes.
on the backs of who, which ancestors, what parental lessons, what
Yeah.
foundations are below you, and maybe do you want to keep them? Sometimes I find
Yeah.
fourth stuff is like somebody's like, I'm renovating my family of origin stories,
Oh, yeah.
and believe them.
Yeah. And, or like I had a really interesting thing regarding lineage of teachings recently where a young lady, well, young to me, she's in her 30s. And I'm old enough to be her father, right? She actually sees me as a grandfather figure because I'm the teacher of her teacher. So she sought me out and to say, hey, just so you know, what you're doing matters. And she sent me this thing with all these women who have, remember how I told you I did the Venus cycle first?
Yeah.
So she's big on the Venus cycle. And she sent me this thing with all these women who have been experiencing the Venus cycle with her. And these are all Spanish speaking women, right? Because the lady that I taught was bilingual. And so I don't speak Spanish, but she spoke English, and then she taught Spanish speaking people. And now there's all of these Spanish speaking people going around experiencing the Venus cycles because of this other woman that I taught. And she was like, just kind of waking me up to that. And it woke me up to this idea of like lineage, like, I was handed those teachings by this person and then I handed them off. And and it's amazing, like just 2 generations down in terms of the lineage, like there's this whole new part of the world, the Spanish speaking world, that's being opened up. And it's like, it's mind blowing. It's like, wow, what a wonderful privilege, and what a wonderful, like, what a huge responsibility to know that, that that there's this 7 generation concept really is real. And we're touching untold numbers of people that we may never even meet. But by touching each other in this moment, we're touching all kinds of people, it's really profound.
Yeah, so it's kind of a nice idea of that sort of the legacy value of the fourth looking like that, like reverb into the future that you won't even live to know the long tail of your influence.
Yeah. I made a conscious decision with my book when I wrote it, like, do I want to be popular now? Like, do I want to write what everybody's talking about or whatever, what's going to be hot right now? Or do I want to leave something that's going to last?
Oh my gosh, I totally get you on that with astrology front too. I've got a book in my draft phase in astrology that it would be my version of like, this matters even if no one else wants to read it,
Exactly. Yeah.
But for those Libras, because we got to get back to you guys, you're looking at these deep houses, right? The deeper houses, the soul houses too, of 4, 8, and 12 as Mercury goes through his journey through Taurus, in April, May, June kind of thing, and then end of July, August, September in Taurus, which is, which is Virgo. All of these will take you very deep. So not just like, what is your lasting legacy, because it starts there. What do you want to establish as a foundation that matters? But then your very sense of the non-personal, transpersonal, true essence of reality yourself. It's a very soulful, elemental year for the Libra people.
Yeah, and it's also, if you think about it, it's like 3 types of family. Like there's biological family of origin type stuff. Then there's like, my wife is half Armenian. Her mother came from Armenia. So there's a whole culture thing that I share with her around that like without her I would have no idea about. Like I was ignorant that there was a genocide over there with and that there was
you know that when you know an Armenian, because I'll let you know.
Right. You know what I'm
Armenians
saying?
in my life. Yeah.
So there's like your family of origin, then there's like your marriage and or business family, and then there's your spiritual family. So there's like 3 kinds of family that you can flow within and feel nested within. And like revisiting those and like, hey, am I taking care of these relationships and making sure that they're going to last? Am I adding value to these relationships and leaving something behind that's going to be, something that the people I care about can hold on to,
Yeah. Wonderful. That's great. I'm looking forward to seeing that play out with my Libra people this year. I've got a few in mind. And then we have the Scorpio water people, and Gary, you can start us out.
Yeah, so Capricorn is the 3rd house from Scorpio. And we talked about the 3rd house as like being your local community. So yeah, who do you play with when you're a kid, right? You play with your brothers and sisters and the kids next door. That's your local community. And then as you get older, you get on the school bus and then you go to elementary school and it might be like all the kids from like several streets around, whatever. Then you get to middle school and it's like, and then when you get to high school, it's like the whole county and whatever. And like, so it's relative, some people who live in New York City, they may feel like the entire city is their local neighborhood. And that's a huge swath. But then there's also like, boroughs within that and whatnot. But what makes up a neighborhood is diversity. It's groups of different people who have different ways of being, and that and all the interactions between those differences, that's what makes a community, And so like really tuning into like, oh yeah, like these people over here really do it kind of differently. And like, if I really slow down and pay attention to what they're doing, like that's really kind of freaking cool. And I can get some ideas about what I want to do just by hanging out and watching what they're doing and stuff. So yeah, it could be very fun. That could be a very fun experience. And Scorpio,
So I have a question then that I'd like to entertain with you. I mean, we have real community and real local community and real neighborhoods. And then we have this weird thing called a virtual neighborhood with the people we interact with quite a lot online. Do you consider the 3rd house works that way?
Well, it's interesting, I've seen particularly Vedic people talk about the internet being the 12th house because it's sort of hidden and it's far away. So I can see both things, but if there are people that you interact with on a regular basis that you're in communication with, like the people who are in your DMs, yeah, that would be like more of a 3rd house, right?
Yeah, that's what I would say too. It's like, it's not that necessarily the vast spaciousness of your fans. It's more like those people that you have a hood online with and you spend time with them. Yeah.
Yeah, like Lori and I DM now and then. Hey, what about this? She sent me the link to get on this show together in the Facebook DM, right?
Or exactly. Or like there's a certain cadre of people that I will actually respond to on Facebook comments and stuff that I like a lot. So they're my community, and I hate Facebook these days, but like for them, I'll be there. You know what I mean? So
right. Yeah.
So it's a virtual.
Yeah. So I think there is a legitimate aspect to that, that is community. I think there's an illusory nature to that too, though, that we need to remember that that's not the full array of human you need people, local people to hang out with, and like
Yeah,
boots on
well,
the ground, like, you know what I'm
that's
saying?
what we learned in the pandemic, is that you can't just toss out real connection, because people got really, really depressed during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Being online wasn't the antidote to real-time people in your life, you
Yeah,
know?
it's not the
So,
full deal.
so yeah, so we doth digress. So they're doing the third house stories, and maybe revising and changing that energy as the
Oh,
Capricorn.
yeah, there's like all of these incredible different relationships between the different groups that you belong to. And it's like a friend of a friend might show up in a weird way, in a challenging way, that's like, oh, wow, well, that person's like some kind of weirdo, right? Because it's retrograde trickster energy. And it's like, you might be like, whoa, like, yo, what, your friend is like whack, man, get him out of here, right? But actually lean into that and be like, hey, yo, that thing you said, that's like pretty wild, man. What are you talking about anyway? Right. And because if you lean into it, like there's a whole nother rabbit hole of stuff that can open up, and you find out like, oh, maybe they meant something totally different from what you were thinking, and it's actually kind of cool. And there's a whole nother, conversation that opens up there and whatnot,
Yeah,
Um, so
totally.
yeah, so
And your sibling relationships too, for you Scorpios, you could revise the
absolutely.
relationship for sure. Have a new direction with that.
Yeah, because those can get kind of, like stale and rote and stuff after a while, It's like you
Mhm.
get stuck in these patterns and whatnot. So just try
Exactly.
something different, man. Try
My
anything
son's a
that seems
Scorpio
to be fun.
rising, and I'm trying. My goal sometime in 2023 is to get a family vacation with my children. So this, his time with his sister in some getaway place like Mexico or Hawaii. That's on my mental agenda for my life. And so he certainly would be revising his sibling relationship if he had a vacation with his sister. Hasn't had that
Yeah,
since he was a child.
yeah, no doubt, right? Yeah,
Exactly. So funny. Okay, so there's a third house onset, and that's happening during the, like, December, January, February, and then we move into
right.
the flow of the Taurus seventh house, which is going to
Seventh
have,
house.
April through
Those
May.
one-on-one relationships. So you could literally meet someone through a friend of a friend that becomes a boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, whatever you call those people these days. I don't even know that I know, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Or go into some deep negotiations and revisions with the one you're with, if you're with someone.
yeah, exactly. And because human relationships are so complex, man. And we tend to like want people to stay the same, but that doesn't happen. Life is not static. Life is always moving, and people are the same. People are growing. I mean, God forbid somebody stay the same, all like that would be boring as hell, man. It's kind of like this, this thing we talked about, the relationship between water and earth. It's like that stability, that structure, and that security
Mhm.
versus like being able to flow and morph and like find new things. It's like so like, yeah, you might try like just expressing an emotion that you normally withhold, right? Like normally I don't go there with this person because I know they don't like it or whatever. And you might think about it and be like, well, maybe they don't like it because when I express it this way, it feels like there's animosity or something. So what if I express that same emotion, but in a joking way? What's their reaction? Like, just play with it a little bit and see, like, try things out, that so that you're freeing up energy and it's not stuck in these ruts that become static and kind of, because if water gets where it's not moving, that's the most unhealthy, like, stagnant water is like really unhealthy, right? So
Exactly.
it needs to keep flowing and moving to be healthy.
Mhm. And then
That's,
then these Scorpio folk get to finish in the 11th house, which is a very positive house in general, but also a relating house.
yeah, it's your relationship within groups, right? So, but it's also the second house from the 10th, which is like, so it's the money from your career. And where does
Exactly.
money come from? It comes from other people, and that's what all of these like business gurus and stuff, like so many of them are just like, they make you realize like people are the key to your success. It's people, it's human connections, it's your relationships with people that make you successful, right?
Mhm.
And so whether that be your followers or your colleagues or all of the above, um, those relationships and the vitality, and being willing to try different things within those and stir things up, maybe be, do that trickster energy of like, hey, let's say something that is sort of verboten, right? Because that's, this whole lockdown thing became like so literal in so many ways. Like there's literally so many things now that like you can't even question certain concepts. Like there's these ideologies that are like it's taken for granted that this ideology is the right ideology and you must say things this way. And if you even question that ideology, then you're a racist or you're a bad person or whatever. It's like, seriously, how can an ideology be that absolute? Like that's ridiculous. And
I
so
agree.
finding a way to question that in like a lighthearted, maybe fun way, or like poking at it from the edges and being like, yeah, I see you, and I'm not going to be like corralled into this tight little corner that you're trying to put me in. I'm gonna flow, and I'm gonna do, you know what I'm saying?
Sure,
That kind of
absolutely.
thing.
Mercury can be very funny, I mean, so there's a quality, how can you bring your communication to others in the world, seventh house stuff, into the world in a way that's maybe playful and mischievous, and yet get something across. And, I do think with the end point being the 11th house for Scorpios, and knowing that Venus does a 4-month stay, June through to October in the 10th, there's a good possibility that Mercury is going to forerun or forelead a real upgrade in resources from career, as well as that could be a very delightful thing for the Scorpios at the end of this long journey through the elemental air year.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like Mercury's going to be like, okay, well, Venus is busy in the 10th. I'm over here in the 11th, and I'm going to, and this is ending, guys, at the end of the summer, like it's kind of like August, September, where you could suddenly get, really some juicy results from career in terms of your gains from that career path.
Yeah, the 11th house is a house of acquisition for sure. And it might be from areas that you did not expect, it might be from out of left field. And so being open to the possibilities of new income streams, and just, letting that flow, saying yes to it and letting it flow.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because we never know, those retrogrades can surprise us. So yeah, stay in the flow and see where it takes you. Yeah, wonderful. We'll move it on to the fiery archers of the world, the Sages, who are dealing with this story as well. Okay, Gary, what do you want to say about that Capricorn second house?
Right. So Capricorn is the second sign from Sagittarius. So again, resources, we're talking about the Trigon of mastery here. So resources, both tangible and intangible, right? And it's kind of like the iceberg model of consciousness, when you psychologists talk about, like most of consciousness is below the threat, like there's so much going on that we're not really aware of, right? And it's the same thing with resources. Like the tangible resources that you have is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many intangible resources that you command, and so like really deciding like, hey, when's the last time that I felt really courageous, or when's the last, like pick a resource that you have but you haven't used lately, and just be like, yeah, I'm going to bring that out, and I'm going to consciously like, bring it to bear, and I'm going to practice using that resource, and bring it into the 6th house, right? I'm going to repeat that day to day. I'm going to draw squares for like 30 days and like see what happens, and then that's going to open up new vistas and new possibilities in the 9th house, right?
In the 10th.
Oh, sorry, in career, yes.
Yeah, in the career house. Yeah, it's kind of like it starts right close to home, though, right? Because it starts close to home and it ends with sort of the career reputation story. But that second house stuff is really interesting sometimes, because it is really close to home. It's close to you, and it's also a little bit like you can be a little blindsided by things in the second house, because technically it's an aversion to your identity. So there may be, with that Mercury retrograde, some surprises, in the very beginning of the story, which now would be like for you guys listening, December 6th to February 11th, like where could there be a little trickster in the house of earnings, possessions, reasons, you know?
Yeah, and it's like you might find that your values have shifted a little bit. I mean, imagine that, right? Imagine that the things that you valued when you were 20 aren't necessarily the same when you're 50. I mean, of course they aren't, right? Our values shift and change constantly. We're always growing. And so you might find like, hey, this thing that was really extremely important to me, like, wow, like something happened. Like you might have a Mercury retrograde experience where something breaks or something is gone, and that it used to be really important to you. And you go, wow, you know what? It doesn't even really matter. And that's because your values have shifted. Vice versa, you might find something changes and you go, oh my God, I really missed that thing. And I didn't even realize I cared. But that's a reflection of the value that you're putting on that thing. So the second house is about values as much as the things themselves. It's the value that we put on those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. I always find that's funny with Sages, because Sages are in general, like, I don't know, the free spirited energy, and they're not necessarily possessive and oriented or fixated on money or possessions, right? I mean, there's often a kind of generous philanthropic quality to a lot of Sag energy. But here they are, confronted with a mercurial moment, and Pluto's been terraforming that second house for our dogs
Oh
since
my God,
2008.
yeah.
So we're really looking at a really spicy time of the value structure of your whole identity, maybe
And
changing
again,
underneath you.
yeah, and again, it's like we're at the trimming out stage of the remodel, right? So it's like there's been this ongoing shift in your values, and where you've been like really rethinking things and be like, there may be some ideology that you had really bought into, and now you see it in a different light. You go, my God, I don't actually believe that. It took like some extreme version of it for me to see that I don't, but I actually don't believe in that anymore. And it's like, and nature abhors a vacuum. So if you don't believe in that, then what do you believe in? And it's like, and so you've been going through that. So you've got most of that figured out, but now it's like putting the finishing flourishes on it, where you can like tie a bow on it and be like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, my values have shifted, and here's how, and like, here's the like pretty way that I can package that up for people when people ask, well, wait a minute, you're doing this now, not that, what's going on? And you can just be like, yeah, da da da. And
yeah. Well, I know quite a bit of Sag people as well, like in my real life. So IRL in real life, and I'm going to watch how this works out for them. I'm thinking of one particular person, and I can see how I can always see him leaning into this sky already. So it's kind of cool. Well, thank you for that. We're going to keep moving to the poor Capricorns of the universe, where we started talking about you earlier, because you've had Pluto moving.
Yeah, there's been this huge remodel going on in your first house for quite some time now. And the good news is that, yeah, it's one more thing in your first house, but which is your identity, but it's your identity as in like, that's the thing. We're not singular, right? We're multiple people. We have all kinds of identities. So, there's various identities that you've been struggling with. And now the good news is, yeah, there's going to be a little more disruption in that, but it's really about like kind of putting a bow on it, kind of finishing up of like, yeah, okay, there's this new identity that I've been working on, and it's time to be out with that, like come out as whatever, right?
It's like the fine tuning on a song. Now you're doing the last touches on the, in the studio to just refine it, really.
Yeah, and anybody who's ever done anything creative, I think one of the early things you find out is like, you could go on forever with that fine tuning process, right? And never put it out there. But at some point you have to just fling it out to the universe and say, okay, enough, like it's done. Like, I'm not because I'm finished. Like, I could be creative with this forever, but I just have to make a decision to say, okay, enough. And so it might be like that point now where it's like, okay, I'm reaching that enough stage. And so what do I need to do to like tie this up and get it where it's presentable and get it out there?
Exactly. And with this deep renovation, kind of Pluto finally finishing with you in the next 2 years, this elemental Mercury year could also be about like embodying this transformation of the last 2008 onward to now, like really bringing it into form within yourself, because it's Earth, and Mercury wants to bring it home to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool, so cool. And then, all that love energy of the fifth house or the play and the fun is there for Mercury to help you with as well this summer or this year, April through to June 11th. That's kind of
Yeah,
nice.
in the spring, the spring could be romance in the air, but again, it might be somebody you didn't think you were attracted to, like a little bit different. And that's the thing, like, we have types, right? It's like, oh, they're not my type. Perfect. Then go for it. Like, go for somebody who's not your type, for God's sakes.
Yeah. Or if
Because
you're
it's
with
not,
somebody, then mix it up, it's because this
yeah,
is pleasure and even sexual energy. So you could have like, you could be stuck in a rut with the one you're with and finding inventive and strange and unusual and outside the box ways of enjoying each other, whatever
yeah,
that.
just having fun. And it might even be going back to something like retrogrades are often like, they talk about people from the past showing up. It might be like going back to like, what did we do for fun back in the day, back in the beginning? Like, let's try that again. So
Mhm.
it could just be that in terms of the differences. Oh, it's just something we haven't done in a while or whatever. But yeah, just having fun with it and being creative, releasing that creative energy, that eros, right? And it's heart energy, right? It's like engaging with your heart, and really taking a risk of being loving and being vulnerable, and engaging your heart with something. And
Yeah.
the problem there is you can get hurt, right? But if you don't risk it, then you never get the feeling of the rewards of, human beings are not rational creatures. We're really emotional creatures. And I mean, I think Capricorn would like it if we were really rational. Like everything's systematic, 1, 2, 3, go with the program and you'll get here, right? But life doesn't work that way. But
Oh,
the great part about that is when we make these weird emotional decisions, things happen that we would never have planned on. Like you could literally not plan on this thing happening.
well,
So we get these happy accidents. It's like, oh wow, I would never have planned on that, but like it's actually pretty cool, but it's just totally accidental. But okay, like I get this really cool thing from being emotional.
well, I
And
know a
that's
cap, I know a cap rising who's got this it's like tantra life going, whatever, really crazy wild stuff. But it's also the staid and fixed and steady and and predictable quality of a Taurus fifth house, likes to stick with what's known and not change. I mean, Uranus has been going through that fifth house for caps now since like 2018, first ingress, and so you've been shaking it up, and already now Mercury's in here for an elemental area to continue to bring something fresh and different here into your romance,
yeah,
creativity, and play life.
yeah. Yeah. And then of course, when you bring that energy out, that heart energy out into the world, it expands your horizons. And so that Virgo energy will, be a time when you can discover new vistas in both internally and externally, right? And it might have to do with reorganizing things or rethinking things. You might have to really like re-examine, like, wait a minute, did you just say what I think you said? Like, does that even make sense? And like really just like stopping and going like, I find myself all the time with certain emotions, for instance, where I go, wow, yeah, that's a very familiar emotion, but I never actually stop to look at that emotion and like, you know what? Now that I stop and look at it, it's not exactly healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and wow, so maybe I should let that one go, that kind of thing where you like, if you really just stop and actually look at it, you realize it's like, whoa, that's on the surface, it looks like, okay, no big deal. But and it's the same thing in the reverse too, when you really, you might, what we were talking about before, you might have people who are from a different culture or something, and they have certain terms or whatever that, and you don't understand it. So you just, it kind of, it goes right over your head. And then one day you hear them say that word in a different way and it sticks and you go, wait, what does that word mean? And they go, oh, it means this. And you go, oh my God, you guys have been talking about this the whole time and I haven't been paying attention. But well, that's actually real, and it opens up this new vista for you to
Yeah,
see things differently. Yeah.
exactly. Totally love that idea, the new vistas and how something can be seen anew, after being seen and then or understood or heard, and now boom, there's like an epiphany. I love that word. Also, the ninth house energy makes me think of things to do with travel and foreign shores, and Mercury is a patron protector god of travelers on the road. And so, on a very literal level, one of the things that this elemental year may do is have you spend some time on a long, far off journey, anytime, after the end of July to early October, and expect it to be somehow quite important to your very identity, to who you think you are in the world. All right, we got to move to me, the Aquarius, then the always first Pisces, fishes, and I'm going to have to roll. So I always say Pisces first and always first because they get mad when you say the other thing.
Okay. All right.
It starts with the word last.
Alpha and Omega, right?
Oh my God, you really have to watch it with the Pisces. They're so irritable about that. Okay, so Aquarius risings. That's my
So
rising.
for Aquarius, yeah, this is the 12th house. And the 12th house is a really interesting house because it is simultaneously like all the stuff. It's an aversion to the first, which means it's hidden. It's difficult to see it. So the 12th house was typically like places you would go, like hospitals or ashrams or temple, like places you would go to get away from quote unquote real life, and so there it's like this secluded part of yourself that you don't really have a connection to, but it's also very spiritual, right? If you go, I mean, I lived in a Buddhist monastery for a short while, and it was really an incredible experience, and I'm really glad that I did it. But I would never be able to pull off that life, living as a monk, not a chance, not in this body. But I was really glad that I did it. And so this idea of like getting yourself a getaway, allowing yourself some time out to be the hermit, but not necessarily in a forced way, in a way that's of your choosing, of like, hey, I would really like to go and spend some time doing blank, which may be nothing, or it may be, I just want to spend some time reading, or I just want to hang out, listen to music. And this is something that you could do like literally on the daily. You can give yourself that 1 hour a day that's blocked out where it's literally no time.
I need to speak to this because I'm an Aquarius rising, so I can tell you exactly what this might look like for someone like me, because it's already started. Normally when Mercury's in Cap and the cluster happens in the pile up in Cap during Christmas time, the stelliums that happen here at Christmas, Venus, Mercury, Sun, I usually go away to a foreign land. But this is interesting because it's this elemental year ingress that started in December, and this is Mercury and Cap, sort of the bell note or the keynote for the whole elemental year. I started thinking differently this morning before we got on the call, Gary, and I thought, I'm moving into this new place in January, and I want to make it a temple and a sanctuary and candles and incense, and I want to get up every morning and do my prayer mat thing, you know what I mean? And I have this vision of this new place for myself, and it's something completely different than getting away from it all. It's taking where I am and getting into who I really am. Yeah.
Beautiful, wonderful. Yeah, I'm going through something similar.
The vision came in the morning, and here we are talking about the very thing.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm going through something similar. I just moved to a new place, and I've got a hill on the property that's really good for stargazing, and I'm thinking about building like a stone circle up there. That's like, it's a sky temple. It's a place for being, forming a sacred relationship with the sky.
That sounds beautiful. I'll have to come down and visit you then and do some gazing with you.
Yeah, I might even end up having a small gathering here, so maybe we'd be doing that.
Wait, what's your rising sign again?
Aquarius.
I thought so. Yeah, I remember that. So both of us are like simple, like quality too. So you see, we didn't set this up, guys. I mean, this is an elemental air year, earth year, and Mercury's like got the pitch pipe for the start off in our 12th house. And so both Gary and I independently are having these sort of calls.
Where's my temple?
The temple.
Yeah. Where's my spiritual family? Where's my spiritual home? And then of course the next retrograde will activate the 4th house. We're talking about that Trigon of dynasty again. And so yeah, and I talked about how that experience that I had with the lineage, like finding out that the student of a student, and she calls me grandfather, and it's like, it's a trip, man. It's and then the next one will be activating the 8th house, which is about joint resources and stuff. And in fact, I have a group of astrologers that I hang out with, and we call it the Sky Astrology Conference. And we've been, we were forced to take some time off for a while, and just recently, the band's getting back together, man.
Oh, nice. Oh my God, that's wonderful. Okay, so
So,
will the band get together down the pipeline like July, August, September? When's the band? Because
yeah,
that's
we're at,
the
yeah,
band goes into
exactly.
Virgo.
Yeah, that's exactly the timeline we're looking at. And then,
Mhm.
maybe even next year doing something small later this year, and then maybe something a little bigger next year. But that
Yeah.
idea of like shared resources and stuff with the eighth house is already coming up.
Exactly. And then a reminder too, that for all of us Aquariuses, this is our moksha houses. It's also the very deeper spiritual houses of the chart, 12, 4, and 8. And because of most of us Aquarius risings have been under the Uranian energy in our fourth house, some of us have been uprooted or had dramatic changes. So it depends on the degree of your rising sign, as he migrates. So, through the sign of Taurus. So, the first Aquarians in like 1 to 17, 18 of 1 to 20 degrees have been really uprooted, Aquarius risings, and changes of home that are unexpected. But I would say that elemental air being, of course, earth, to root or earth or ground something. I'm having a feeling that this is also going to help us ground into a more, I call it my forever home. Where's my forever home?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what happened for me. I just bought a farm.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
And it depends, your ascendant degree will indicate, when you're more stable, like someone at first 5 degrees of Aquarius has already been through the worst of the Iranian lightning bolts of change, Yeah, so it's kind of a beautiful grounding, homecoming, pilgrimage, being able to share resources and partake of joint resources with others for us Aquarians. And we're communal beings. Aquarian energy likes to be in communion with other in groups. So this is going to amplify some of that in the eighth house as well, which is resourceful and financially positive. Of course, eighth house is mortgages too, and leveraging money and ways to get money that belongs to other groups like a bank. And we finished strong then it's the end of the year, end of July, through September, October, when we're in that Virgo eighth house vibe. So some of us could be coming into some legacy wealth with this.
Yeah, you might have access to resources that you didn't know you had. You might find that various relationships that you had offer you access into, and again, it might be intangible resources. You might have access to somewhat the passion that another person brings to their art, and just hanging out with them fires you up too, because they're so passionate.
Mhm.
Kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we shall see. Aquarius is in the world. Let us know what happens. Thank God Saturn's leaving our sign on March the 7th. And we don't have to be so serious, sober-minded, and responsible anymore.
Yeah, maybe I won't have to have a 20-inch beard anymore. I can
Yeah,
trim
no
it down a
kidding.
little
And my shoulder, all my shoulder pain will go away because I'm carrying the burdens of everybody on my shoulders. Oh my God. All right. We're moving off of Aquarius and into the first, but always first, Pisces, sun, moon. Oh no, Pisces rising is best, but listen for your sun and moon if you need to. Yeah. All right. This is a story of the 11th house start off. Talk about it, Gary.
Yeah, so the 11th, we talked about that as being about groups, but it's also a resource house. It's a very blessed house. It's one of the more fortunate houses. And so it's because it's the second house from the 10th, so it's the money you get from your career. So be on the lookout for new income streams, Pisces, and just say yes to them, right? If you're offered work, say yes and figure it out later. And that's something, like Pisces is actually pretty good at that. Virgo, me being the Virgo moon, like I always want to, like, if I wasn't sure that I could, if I wasn't absolutely sure that I could do the job, I would say, well, maybe. And people would say, well, okay. And then they'd move on because maybe it's like a lukewarm answer and they're not looking. I learned, like, if you just need to say yes and figure it out, yo. I don't think Pisces has that problem. They're a little more malleable. They know the magic and just saying yes and figuring it out as they go. And so this will be especially a year where that will pay off. Yeah, and it'll be as much about trusting the other person as whatever they're offering, whatever work that they're offering.
Hmm.
So do I trust this person? Do I feel good in my bones about this person? And if you do, then whatever they're offering, as wacky as it may seem, just go for it, because it'll work out.
Yeah. And, you know, technically your 11th house could be an eldest sibling in Indian astrology. And I've often find it shows up that way. So you could even get some support or an offering or some new direction through, I don't know, a communication from an eldest sibling. You never know.
Right. Or somebody that feels like an older brother or sister,
Or
right?
feels like that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
yeah, has a quality of like looking out for you, like an older brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, they're like a couple steps ahead on the path, and they're like giving you heads up, like, hey, just so you know,
Yeah.
yeah. Right. And like listen to that, right? Because that's free advice. Assuming, assuming it's any good.
Yeah,
Free
and
advice
like
is awesome.
there's people who want to help you up there. It's like the benefactors and allies type
Right.
energy. So it
Exactly.
starts off really strong for Pisces. It's a really nice feeling that is, and it's like I kind of see the elemental air year, even though this is a transit that ends on February 11th. It's more like where it starts. The inception is from that 11th house, and so it's kind of like the keynote or the pitch pipe of the whole year.
Yeah, it's going to start and end there too, because we'll have another Capricorn retrograde.
Exactly. Although it's mixed up with Sag, so we won't get to that. It's confusing.
Yeah, mostly it's in Capricorn though.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then so we're going to go from the 11th, and then this is part of the relationship trigon, right? So you have relationships that are about belonging to a group, right? And so any person within that group, you have a relationship with them that's about your membership in that group. And then when you start relating as a member of one group to a member of another group, that's like the third house, because that's what neighborhoods are made of. Neighborhoods are made of different groups that all have to relate and get along. And so the third house would be about, okay, like, how can I manage to bring these two separate groups that I belong to? How can I either physically bring them together, or somehow bring the experiences that I've got from each one of them and somehow have some magical interaction between them that like opens up new possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also just remember the third house can be those siblings as well. Just as a
Yeah.
principal, childhood friends, it could be really popping into the narrative for some reason, like in April 3rd through to June 11th. When I think of my sister as a Pisces rising, it's my goal to visit her in the United States sometime in the spring. That may be just even like, sibling energies going to be active in communicating with a sibling, or even traveling with a sibling or to a sibling.
Or people that you know from your early childhood, people
Mhm.
you went to school with, yada yada.
Yeah, returning from the past, retrograde. It's very literal sometimes, astrology. It surprises me, how literal it is. Like a retrograde is from the past, or you change your mind and go back over something. It's kind of.
Yeah.
And we finished it with the first, but I was first Pisces. I get that Virgo 7th house of significant others. What do you think about that ending?
Yeah. That retrograde in Virgo, Mercury is very dignified in Virgo. And so that has a lot of potential you have a lot of potential there to relate to people in ways that are where these people are very high quality people who have something really nice to offer. And it may require you to step out of your comfort zone in order to do that, but it's worth it. They're worth it. And so taking a risk on somebody that's a little bit different than you would usually hang out with, but like just trusting that the quality of who they are or what they're bringing is totally worth that taking that risk.
Yeah, and you may hear back from people that you were very connected to in the past, as well during the retrograde itself.
Yeah.
I found so many times the Mercury retrograde through my 7th is literally like that. Long-term relationship person shows back up with the email or phone call, usually with some value to it. There's some reason for that reconnection, and just so you guys know that even though. This is like the Virgo 7th house angular activation, July 28th to October 5th. The retrograde itself is around the 3rd week of August to the 2nd week of September. There's always a message when people come back from the past during like a 7th house or 5th house transit.
Yeah, it could be that there's something that needs closure. It could be that there is actually something that was of value that wants to be reactivated. It could be something entirely new. I mean, I recently reconnected with it's not a seventh house relationship. It's more like that third that we were talking about, but I reconnected with a cousin that I had from in a really long time. And one of the things that we had in common was we both like to run back in the day. And she's still she's like running marathons and stuff, you know? And so I was like, holy crap, like, wow, you really like, and I realized like I have lost touch with that part of me. Like I haven't been doing that. And so I spent a fair amount of time last year, like feeling the joy of just like opening up and like running, just full bore, just letting my legs fly.
Oh my God, that's wonderful. You know something, I love that story because it's people coming back from the past in the relating houses, let's say 3, 7, or 11 for new Pisces. But yeah, there's always some, like, it's like the universe is giving you a, what's the word? Like, I know, I'm trying to think of it's like there's no other way to deliver the mail, right? Except through a person.
Exactly.
He's the mailman. So that, and for you,
God
it was
speaks
get
to
back
us
into
through
shape.
people.
I thought you looked really slender when we first came jogging up a storm. Yeah, so
Well,
seriously.
no, not jogging. I've been like flying, man. I've been doing like short bursts of sprints, like wind
Nice.
sprints. Yeah,
Hasn't really
yeah,
got you going, right?
yeah, yeah. It was really interesting, and I've been on my bike doing a lot of that too. Yeah, I lost like 50 pounds when Saturn was in my first house.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to catch up with you. I'm a Aquarius rising. Come on, Saturn in our first house. We just wanted to sit around brooding for the last 2 years.
I've done some of that too. Yeah,
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to
This
get
is
on
about
it.
Pisces, Lori. We can't forget that.
Oh
We
yeah, yeah,
gotta
yeah.
keep,
So back to
gotta
you,
keep.
Pisces. So we're loving that the mailman is coming through the relating houses and often through people you haven't seen for a while to deliver some mail that you need to have.
Best friends, old lovers, business partners, all of those, lawyers. I mean, what other seventh house relationships are there? That's like enemies.
Open enemies. Well, if they come to you from the past, you can just tell them to F off, but they might have a message for you. But just open enemies in general, where Mercury is. Yeah, you know, the visible opponents.
Enemies can be big teachers, man. You know, and like I've had enemies, people that started out as enemies and then turned into friends, you know. That's
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
the visible enemies are way better than the hidden ones. I mean,
oh my God.
basically, if you want to talk to your visible enemy, you often learn something important about you and you need to hear it. So,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah. Yeah, well, we actually did it. We spent 2.5 hours together today. Crazy ass long. Thank God. I've hired my sister to do all the timestamps for me. Otherwise, I would like pull my hair out.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my sister's I got one of my sisters. She's amazing, doing my back end social media timestamping because I don't have time anymore. But anyway, Gary, that was fun. Thank you. I look forward to
Thank
connecting with you again on other topics in the future to do with Mercury themes. I would love
Right
to come
on.
to you as well. Everyone,
Or
you can
asteroids or who knows
got to
what.
give your last pitch, dreamastrologer.com.
Yes. Dreamastrologer.com is the website. You can find me there. I have a membership program where there's a vast archive of, like I said, I've been going around the country and the world teaching for like, God, I've been doing this for 30 years, Lori. I've been an astrologer for 30 years. And I've been doing it
Well, I started
full-time
hand casting
professional.
charts in 1987 or 6, like with math, like and a calculator, and like give me a break. It's scary how hard that was to do.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a big archives of material there that you can access as a member. And then we have member meetings every month where we all get together and like talk about the latest teaching. And there's of course, like a monthly report that comes out and stuff. So
yeah, if you're into astrological magic and stuff, he's got a great magical report that comes out monthly as well.
yeah.
Anything else we forgot to say about what you're up to? Just go check his website. Everything you need.
Yeah, all of my social media links are there. I'm on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and what else? OpenSea, I have some NFTs on OpenSea. Fine Art America, I have some photography on there, all of that
Oh
stuff.
yeah, the photography is beautiful. Well, you know, we went so long, it's insane, but there was a poem that Gary had that he thought he might read at the beginning. And I said, if we do that at the beginning, we don't want to get to the end. So do you want to read it now just to finish up? So we will finish strong.
Are you sure? It's a little bit long and we've
Well,
already
as long as you don't read it at a snail's pace, Gary, we'll be fine.
Okay. I wrote this prayer a couple of years ago when I was working with the folks over at Astrology Hub. I was the inner circle guide for the Taurus month, and I just wanted to express my reverence for the earth element. And so I'm going to read it to y'all now because I posted it recently on social media and people were like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. So yeah, we'll just close with some good reverence. We'll get into that temple space, right, Lori, of the 12th
Yes,
house.
exactly. I'm feeling, I don't have my incense burning, which is preferentially a frankincense girl myself.
Yeah.
But
No.
I've got my eyes closed.
Maybe you just want to take a breath and imagine that you have some incense burning, or imagine that there's a candle burning, and feel that focus of that state of reverence. Great Earth Mother, for the gift of our home, the earth, the sacred vessel which holds and sustains all life as we know it, we thank you. Please help us to remember the deep wisdom of the earth element. Teach us to look within. Help us to see that we, like you, are deep like a river canyon. Help us to remember, understand, and integrate all the levels and strata of identity that time has slowly, lovingly, and even sometimes violently carved through our being. Teach us to access the whole range of our being, knowing that we have access to the wisdom of all people we have been and will become. Great Earth Mother, for the gift of our bodies and the plant nation that feeds and heals them, we thank you. Help us to remember the gift of the plants. Teach us to love and nourish our bodies as temples so that we may walk with the confidence, strength, and endurance of true health and vitality. Teach us to discover our plant medicine allies and help us to get to know them and access their wisdom. To the mineral nation that has humbly and silently helped build and maintain our bones and all the foundations of life experience, we thank you. Teach us to remember also that we are incredibly diverse like you, as we contain in our bodies the many varied minerals, stones, and crystals that make up the earth. Help us to remember that like this earth rainbow, we have access to many, many varied structures, patterns, and energies, as many and varied as all the different bins in our favorite gem store. Teach us to notice these subtle variations in color, composition, and energetic vibration that are always around us. Help us to access these to bring richness, variety, and diversity to our lives, our work, and our messages, so that we may harmonize with a full rainbow spectrum of our brothers and sisters. Finally, teach us to remember and practice the earth power of boundaries and containment. Help us to know and remember what is ours and what does not belong to us. Help us to learn what is enough and to remember and practice the virtues of self-restraint and temperance. Remember in us also the virtue of diligence. Teach us to apply our divine passion for life with discipline, concentration, responsibility, and devotedness, so that our bodies and our lives may become like yours, strong and stable and able to support long-term sustainable growth, which can be counted on to feed and heal ourselves and others. Aho. Amen.
Ah, amen. Aho. Ooh, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. I got chills. I also
Yay.
reminded that you live in a part of the world where there are indigenous artifacts. And who are the indigenous people, by the way, of where you are? You're in the what are those
Southwest Virginia now. I'm in
the mountains near you? What are they called?
Yeah, well, the Cherokee people were the ones in North Carolina where I was living for the last 20 years. To be honest with you, I need to educate myself on the tribal identity of people here in Southwest Virginia. I think the Cherokee might have had some overlap, but I don't think it was the main tribe. I need to look into that.
Yeah, it's good to do that. It had a very beautiful feeling of being coming off a tradition of indigenous respect, for the
Yeah,
earth and all of the connections
absolutely.
we have with other beings. What it got to me when I was listening, because something will always stand out, is like the one about when something's enough, that thing enough, that word stood up for me.
Yeah. There's a line in the Tao about that, like knowing when is enough is to be immune from disgrace.
Yeah.
It's like when you know the power of enough, you stop before you, to know what is enough is to avoid calamity, to avoid disaster, because you know when to stop, you know when to shut your mouth.
There's such a strength in that simple idea of enough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very
I
powerful
love
idea.
it. It's for me to ponder today, and I'm going to be building my new home temple soon. I'm moving in a couple of weeks
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll send you some pictures. I don't own it. I'm just renting it. I haven't found my forever home yet. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Gary. A true pleasure to hang out with you. I mean,
Likewise.
absolutely love time with you. Very easy to connect with what you're saying. You're a great communicator, and I enjoyed it myself. And I hope our audience did too. And please check out his
Yeah,
channel.
thanks everybody.
Alrighty, and I'm going to hang up when I hang up with you, so we're not going to have back chat on the other end. 'Cause I'm
Okay.
gonna head out anyway. So
Good to see you.
big hugs, and I'll send you the
Yeah.
recording as well. Ciao, ciao,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.